Hey there, welcome back. Tonight we slip into the shadows of feudal Japan, not the legends, not the movies, but the real, brutal world of the ninja. Behind the myths of throwing stars and smoke bombs lies something colder, quieter, and much more tragic. These weren't mysterious heroes, they were orphans of the system, trained from childhood to be invisible, loyal, and disposable. For every secret mission, there was a silent suffering. For every disguise, a piece of their identity lost. If you find yourself drawn to these darker corners of history, feel free to like and subscribe, but only if it feels right for you. And I'd love to hear where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. It's always grounding to know we're all listening together, scattered across different hours of the night. So settle in. Let the stillness wrap around you like a fading mist, and prepare to follow a path where survival came at the cost of being seen at all. Tonight, we're not telling a story of honor or fame. We're stepping into the life of someone who was never meant to be remembered. No statues, no scrolls, no last name to pass down. Just dust, silence, and blood. You're born somewhere deep in the rural sprawl of Japan, maybe in Iga, maybe in Koga, where rice paddies stretch out under heavy skies and the mountains rise like forgotten gods. It's the late 1600s, and your birth isn't marked with joy or celebration. It's marked with calculation. Your family doesn't see you as a child. They see you as a blade still waiting to be sharpened. There's no room for softness, no margin for weakness. The world around you is feudal, fragmented, and ruled by clans and warlords who would kill you as easily as they'd step over a puddle. And your family? They've lived in the shadows for generations. You were born into a house of ghosts. You don't know what it means yet, but the day you learn to stand is the day the training begins. At first, it's just mimicking the movements of older children, boys and girls who barely speak but already know how to kill. You crawl not to learn how to walk, but to learn how to creep without sound. You're taught to balance by walking across narrow beams over ponds, to test how calm you can keep your heartbeat when your life might slip into the water below. Your parents speak to you in whispers, not love. Every word they offer is a lesson or a warning. You're not raised to thrive. You're raised to vanish. In a world where others learn to speak their name with pride, you are taught that silence is the only protection you'll ever have. You don't have friends. That word doesn't mean much in your world. The other children are competitors, rivals really. If they fail a lesson, the punishment is brutal. If they succeed where you don't, it's a reminder that weakness means you get left behind. Literally, no one cries for the child who can't make it up the wall. No one turns back for the kid who hesitates with the blade. You learn early that love is a luxury you'll never know. You're taught that emotional attachments are distractions, liabilities, affection is weakness, and weakness gets you killed. You eat little, sleep even less, and bleed often. There is no rest. There is no tomorrow. There is only the next hour. And the next. Most children in other villages are chasing bugs or playing in the fields. You are crawling through thorn bushes barefoot, so your skin grows thicker and your nerves grow dull. You're told that pain is just the sound your fear makes when it leaves your body. You're not sure you believe that, but you say nothing. You never say anything. One wrong word, one hesitation, and you might be discarded like the ones before you. You've already seen it happen. You're 6 years old, and you've already learned to stop crying. The older you get, the quieter you become, not just out of discipline, but survival. Silence seeps into you until it becomes second nature. You're not just hiding your footsteps anymore, you're hiding your thoughts. You're hiding yourself. And as you approach 7 or 8 years old, your training intensifies into something closer to ritual punishment. The line between preparation and torment vanishes. Your days are broken into segments: breath control before dawn, endurance drills until your legs give out, and psychological training long after the sun goes down. You're told to stop blinking during confrontations, to hold your breath when you're afraid, to stare down death without flinching, because death will not blink for you. The body, they say, is a tool. Tools do not complain. You are beaten with sticks when your stance falters. You are dunked in cold rivers when your reaction is too slow. You are denied food for failure, sleep for hesitation, and praise for excellence, because excellence is expected, not rewarded. You aren't thanked for surviving the trial of the day. You're just told what the next one will be. And it's always harder, always colder, always worse. You stop asking when it ends. You stop asking anything. The only real certainty in your life is that every mistake carries a cost. Not a lecture, not a lesson, a scar. You learn that your trainers don't hate you. They're just trying to harden you before the world does it first. It's easy to imagine that, at some point, the adults in your life might offer some kind of kindness. A brief smile, a moment of understanding. But they never do. Not because they don't feel, but because they can't afford to. They were once like you. They remember what happened to the ones who broke, who asked too many questions, who didn't adapt fast enough. Every time they look at you, they're remembering a ghost. You don't remind them of a child. You remind them of a failure they barely outran. And so they push you harder, because you're not being prepared to live. You're being conditioned to not die. And it works. After a while, the bruises don't sting as much. The hunger doesn't make you dizzy. Your body becomes leaner, faster, quieter. You no longer walk. You flow. You no longer breathe in gasps, but in rhythms. You're taught to control every muscle, every movement, every flicker of your eyes. And that's what childhood becomes. A slow death of innocence, replaced by poise and precision. No birthdays, no games. Just a quiet mastery of your body and a permanent cage around your mind. Sometimes, in the rare moments of rest, you look up at the stars and wonder what it might feel like to just be, to laugh, to fall, to yell. But even those thoughts feel dangerous. You bury them, like everything else. Because the only thing more painful than being a ninja is wishing you weren't one. Pain isn't something you avoid, it's something you study. They teach you early that your body isn't yours anymore. It's just another instrument to be used, shaped, and when necessary, broken. Your lessons begin before sunrise, when the air is cold enough to bite, and they often end long after the light's gone. And what happens between those hours would break most grown men. You are forced to crawl through thorn hedges until your forearms drip with blood. You balance barefoot on frozen stones. You stand motionless in the rain, sometimes for hours, until your muscles scream and your knees threaten to give way. All of it has a purpose: to teach your body not to betray you. To teach you that pain is irrelevant. When your foot splits open from a sharp rock, you don't bandage it. You learn to keep walking. When your fingers blister from climbing ropes made of rough hemp, you don't complain. You learn to climb faster. You're taught to disassociate, to ignore the instinct to pull back when something hurts. They tell you that the mind can conquer the flesh. You start to believe them, because what choice do you have? Every injury becomes a lesson. Every scar a certificate. And the worst part is, no one ever checks if you're okay. They don't ask. They don't need to. If you're standing, you're fine. If you're not, you're forgotten. Eventually, you learn to see pain differently. It's not the enemy anymore. It's the tutor who sharpens your edges. You feel it in your knees when you kneel too long, in your shoulders when you hang from a ledge without a sound, in your lungs when you're submerged in water for too long during breath-holding drills. And when you fail, and you will fail, it doesn't matter why. Whether it's fatigue, fear, or injury, you're punished just the same. One mistake means more drills. Two mistakes means no food. Three, and you're sleeping outside, no blanket, no fire. It's not cruelty, it's design. This is how you learn to break the fear of discomfort, to look past the sting of bruises or the ache in your joints. Because if you can't, you won't survive what's coming. And what's coming is always worse. You're being molded for a life where failure means death, and comfort is a luxury you will never afford. Every day becomes a test of how much you can take without flinching. And every time you pass, the test gets harder. Some nights, you curl up in a corner of the dojo, shaking with cold and exhaustion, unsure whether your body can take one more day. But in the morning, you get up. You always get up. Because no one's coming to save you. No one ever will. And somewhere deep in your bruised ribs and torn muscles, that truth settles in like a splinter you'll never remove. Pain is permanent. And the sooner you stop fighting it, the better your chances of living one more day. Silence is no longer just an absence of sound. It becomes a skill, an art, a way of existing. You are taught that the human body is naturally clumsy, too heavy, too loud. So you start from scratch. Step by step, motion by motion, you relearn how to walk. Not like a child, not like a warrior, like mist. The soles of your feet must touch the ground in a precise rhythm. Ball first, then heel, then shift. You train for hours just to cross a wooden floor without making it creak. You move through gravel barefoot until your steps don't crunch. You learn how to suppress your breath, how to slow your heartbeat, how to steady your pulse until it barely registers. The goal is to make yourself invisible, first to ears, then to eyes, eventually even to memory. Walking silently isn't enough. You must run silently too, scale silently, fall silently, kill silently. You're sent to climb sheer walls with no ropes, no harness, just bare hands and aching feet. Your instructors scream at you from below, not because they're angry, but because the enemy might one day do worse. You're forced to climb in the rain, when every surface is slick and every slip could shatter your ankle. But no one cares if you fall. They care if you fall loudly, because in your line of work, sound equals death. One cracked twig, one loose tile, one rustling sleeve, and your mission ends with a sword through your back. So you train until your instincts betray your humanity. You no longer speak unless commanded. You don't cough, sneeze, or yawn. Even your laughter dies in your throat. When you stub a toe or sprain a wrist, you clench your jaw until your teeth grind down because a grunt is a confession of weakness. Eventually, your body adapts. Your joints loosen. Your breathing syncs with the rhythm of the world around you. You become attuned to the way wind moves through trees, the way water laps at a pond's edge, the way footsteps sound in gravel versus sand. You're not just quiet, you listen differently. You exist differently. At some point, someone sneaks up behind you, and you don't flinch. You heard them 4 steps ago. You felt the air shift. And when you finally speak, it's barely above a whisper. Not because you're being stealthy, but because anything louder feels foreign now. Noise becomes uncomfortable, even painful. You avoid crowds instinctively. You begin to fear your own voice. It's not just that you've learned to be silent. You've forgotten how to be loud. And the irony is cruel. You were never meant to stand out. You were meant to disappear. And now, even when you're not on a mission, even when you're walking through a village just to buy rice, no one notices you. Not because they don't see you, but because you've become something the world was never meant to notice. You've become the silence between footsteps, the pause before death, a shadow with no echo. Disguise isn't just a trick, it's survival. By the time you reach your early teens, you've learned to become a dozen different people, all of them convincing, none of them real. One morning, you're dressed as a wandering monk, muttering prayers and bowing respectfully to passers-by. That evening, you're posing as a rice merchant, hauling baskets and talking prices with local farmers. The next day, you might be a beggar with an empty bowl and a limp, or a wounded soldier returning from a phantom war. Each role requires its own voice, posture, walk, vocabulary. You don't just put on clothes, you put on identities, and you can't ever forget who you're pretending to be, not even for a breath. Because if you break character, even once, you die. No second chances. If you're posing as a farmer and someone offers you a tool you don't recognize, you'd better improvise fast. If you're dressed as a samurai, you'd better know how to speak with just the right mix of arrogance and restraint, or else someone will call your bluff, and that someone might be holding a real sword. You spend hours rehearsing your mannerisms in front of polished copper mirrors, not for vanity, for survival. Because when you lie with your face, your hands, your body language, it has to be perfect. You're not just playing a part. You are that person, until the moment you're not. The hardest part isn't the performance, it's what it costs. The more people you become, the less of yourself remains. Sometimes you forget your real name when you wake up. Sometimes you slip into the wrong voice at night. And sometimes, worst of all, you catch yourself enjoying a disguise. You feel safer behind the mask than you do beneath it. The clothes you wear in deception feel more natural than the ones you wear in honesty. And slowly, the line between who you are and who you pretend to be blurs until there's almost nothing left to hold on to. They don't teach you how to return from these identities. There's no ceremony to bring you back, no gentle reminder of your real self. You simply shed the role when the mission's done, like peeling off wet clothing after a storm. And when the next role is assigned, you slip into it without question, because asking questions gets you left behind. If you can't blend in, you're a liability, and liabilities get eliminated. But what happens when you start to believe your own lies? What happens when you look in the mirror and see not one face but 10? When even your reflection doesn't recognize you? That's the part no one warns you about. The job doesn't just steal your voice, your freedom, your safety. It steals yourself. And by the time you realize what's gone, it's already too late to get it back. You don't get a trial run. You don't get to fail quietly. When you're training to become a ninja, there's no safety net beneath you. If you stumble, if you fall behind, if you show weakness, it's not just a bad day. It's a sentence. Because in this world, failure isn't corrected. It's erased. The ones who couldn't keep up aren't given second chances. They simply disappear. One day they're next to you in the line for morning drills, and the next day their mat is empty. No one asks. No one whispers. You learn quickly that the only thing worse than making a mistake is letting anyone see it. You start to understand that this training isn't just about creating strength, it's about filtering out the unworthy. Every test, every punishment, every brutal drill is a kind of sieve. The clan doesn't want to fix you. They want to see if you break. Because if you can't crawl across burning sand or run up a hillside with weighted ropes around your shoulders, how will you survive behind enemy walls? If you freeze during a staged assassination or flinch at the sight of real blood, what happens when the target fights back? They don't want good students. They want survivors, and they're willing to lose a dozen children to produce one shadow. Sometimes the disappearances are subtle, a quiet reassignment, a whisper about dishonor, but other times they're more direct. A failed trainee is marched into the woods and doesn't come back. You're not told what happened. You're not supposed to ask. But the message is loud and clear. You're only one mistake away from being forgotten. That fear stays with you. It crawls under your skin. It shapes every decision you make, every breath you take during drills. Even your dreams aren't safe from it. Worse still is the silence that follows. The others act like nothing happened. Not because they don't care, but because caring is dangerous. Grieving is dangerous. Attachment is dangerous. If you get too close to someone, their failure becomes your grief, and grief slows you down. It makes your hands shake when they should be steady. It clouds your thoughts when your mind should be sharp. So you stop making connections. You harden. You learn to nod politely, to train shoulder to shoulder with someone for years, and feel nothing when they vanish. That's the only way to survive. There's no ceremony for those who fail, no graves, no names etched into stone. Their stories end quietly, swallowed by the forest, the silence, and the shame. And the lesson is cruel but effective. Never let them see you stumble. Never fall behind. Because the only reward for failure in this world is erasure, and the only way to keep your place is to become the kind of person who doesn't leave anything behind. Not noise, not doubt, not friends, and especially not mistakes. When the day finally comes, no one warns you. There's no ceremony, no whispered announcement, just an assignment, your first real mission. Up until now, everything has been controlled, simulated, bloody, yes, but under supervision. But this time, it's different. You're told to leave before dawn. You're handed a blade that still smells like fresh oil. And you're given a name you've never heard before, a face you've never seen, but one that will haunt you for the rest of your life. Because this time, the goal isn't to hide, it's to kill. Not practice, not a lesson, not pretend. This is the real thing. And you are not ready. But that doesn't matter. Readiness is a luxury for other people, merchants, scholars, even samurai. But not for you. You've spent years becoming a shadow. Now they expect you to take a life before you've even begun to understand your own. The target is a low-ranking official. Maybe he betrayed someone. Maybe he stole from the wrong clan. Maybe he did nothing at all. You're not told why. You're not allowed to ask why. You're simply given the command. And in the world of ninja, a command is sacred. Not because it's wise or just, but because obedience is your only currency. Your hands don't shake when you hold the blade. You've practiced too long for that, but something inside you still resists. A small voice buried deep beneath all the drills and punishment, a whisper that asks, "Am I really going to do this? Am I allowed to feel anything?" But you silence it, just like you've silenced every other part of yourself that didn't belong. And when the moment comes, you act. You slip through the garden wall. You find the sleeping quarters. You press the blade to the throat of someone who never even wakes up. It's over in seconds. Quiet. Clean. Perfect. And still, it breaks something in you. You don't scream, you don't cry, you don't collapse in horror like the heroes do in stories, but a part of you does die that night. Not because you killed someone, but because it was so easy, because everything they told you about yourself was true. You're a tool now, a weapon, and weapons don't hesitate. They don't ask questions. They just wait for the next order. When you return, no one congratulates you. You kneel. You report. You hand back the blade. You're told you did well. Then you're dismissed. That's it. Your first kill is filed away like any other errand, like delivering a message or sweeping the floor. You try to tell yourself it meant something, that it was a step forward, that it was justice even. But in your heart, you know better. It was nothing. And if you want to stay alive, you'll have to get used to that feeling, because there will be a next time, and a time after that. And eventually, you won't even remember their names. You'd think the horror would lessen with time, that after your first kill, the shock would dull, the guilt would lift, the fear would fade. But it doesn't. Not really. Because you're not just expected to kill once, you're expected to do it again, and again, and again. And the targets don't get easier. The situations don't get simpler. What changes is you. Your instincts sharpen, your heart rate slows, your hands move with mechanical precision. And the worst part, no one around you is surprised. The instructors don't ask how you're feeling. They only ask how clean the job was. You could be 12 years old, and they'd still expect a body count. You're not the only one either. There are others your age going through the same thing. Boys and girls just tall enough to climb rooftops and just quiet enough to break into a guarded home. You pass them in the halls, during drills, during meal times. And you all carry the same secret. You've already killed someone, maybe more than one. But no one talks about it, because admitting it would make it real. And there's no room for reality in a world built on silence and denial. There's a moment sometimes, right before the kill, just a breath, a heartbeat, where you feel like you're outside your body, like you're watching yourself, blade in hand, creeping up on someone who doesn't know this is their final moment. In those brief seconds, the world goes quiet. Not peaceful, just hollow. It's a vacuum where time stretches and conscience flickers, and you wonder what version of yourself steps forward next. The one who hesitates and dies, or the one who follows through and forgets? With each successful mission, they trust you more. That's the cruel reward. More difficult assignments, longer deployments, less supervision. You're sent farther from the clan, deeper into enemy lands. Sometimes you're embedded in a village for weeks, pretending to be someone's nephew or cousin, waiting for a signal that never comes. Other times, you're dispatched in the dead of night, no backup, no exit strategy, just the target's name and a silent expectation that you'll return, if only to be sent back out again. What no one tells you is that the body doesn't forget. Your shoulders remember the exact angle of each strike. Your knees remember every rooftop landing. And your hands, they carry it all. The cold weight of the blade, the warmth of the blood, the way a person shudders when the life leaves them. These memories don't fade. They settle deep in the joints and the bones until they become part of how you move, how you exist. But what haunts you most isn't the act, it's the aftermath, the walk home, the silence of your room, the weightless hours where no one speaks to you, where the world moves on like nothing happened, and you're left staring at the ceiling wondering how many more names will pass through your hands before you forget to care at all. There's a moment when you realize you're not exceptional, not special, not chosen, just one of many. A single drop in a bucket filled with other children exactly like you, trained, shaped, hardened. You see them every day. In the courtyard before dawn, in the forest during tracking exercises, on the rooftops when the mist is just beginning to lift, all moving the same way, all breathing the same rhythm. all staring ahead with the same vacant focus. You're part of a system, and the system doesn't care if you live or die. It just needs enough of you to survive the process so that the work can continue. You train side by side with these other children. You fight them, race them, spar with them. You're not friends. You can't be. Because only a few of you will make it to adulthood, and everyone knows it. Maybe your instructors don't say it aloud, but you hear it in their tone. You see it in the way they watch. They're not measuring your talent. They're measuring your durability. Who will break? Who will fold? Who will be a liability? The system is always thinning the herd. And yet something inside you still wants connection, still reaches out. You sneak glances during meals. You remember names, even when you shouldn't. You exchange nods, subtle gestures of solidarity. But these moments are fragile. One day you're climbing trees beside someone who has shared your every bruise. The next, they're gone. A failed mission, a misstep, a quiet punishment that no one mentions. Their bedroll is removed before breakfast. Their name scrubbed from the records. Their training partner reassigned, as if they never existed, as if they never mattered. Some of them die on missions. Some are deemed unfit. Some are simply used as examples, punished harshly to remind the rest of you what happens when you hesitate or disobey. And when it happens, no one screams. No one protests. You keep your head down. You accept it because you have to. Because grief is a distraction. And distraction gets you killed. Eventually, you stop looking at the others. You stop hoping. You stop remembering names. You focus only on your footing, your blade, your breath. You let go of the part of you that wanted to belong. And you become what they want, a machine. Quiet, efficient, empty. But sometimes, late at night, when the wind slips through the cracks in the walls and the world feels just a little too still, you remember the faces of those you trained beside, the ones who vanished, the ones who never got to leave the compound. You wonder if they thought of you at the end, if they felt alone, if they were scared. And then you bury the thought, fast and deep, because if you let it sit too long, it will crack something inside you that might never heal. The tools of your trade are extensions of your body. That's what they teach you, again and again. Not weapons, instruments, not blades, limbs. From the first time you hold a wooden practice sword, you're told it must become part of you, as natural as breathing. And there are so many to learn. The katana is elegant, deadly, the weapon of samurai, and also yours, though your use of it is different. No duels, no honor, just precision, speed, silence. You're taught how to strike without resistance, how to cut without letting the blood slow you down. A clean kill is a quiet kill. But a ninja never relies on one weapon. That's the lesson drilled into your skull with each new tool handed to you. You train with the shorter tanto for close quarters, where a long blade will only get in the way. You master the kunai, not just for stabbing, but for climbing, throwing, wedging into wooden joints to slow down a pursuer. You're taught the art of chain weapons, like the kusarigama, where weight, timing, and misdirection matter more than brute strength. And then there are the things outsiders romanticize. Shuriken, the throwing stars. Flashy, cinematic, and surprisingly practical when you're fleeing down a dark alley and need to blind, distract, or disable. But make no mistake, they are tools, not toys. And mishandling them is as dangerous for you as it is for your enemies. Then there are the quieter weapons, the subtler ones. The blowgun and its deadly darts, laced with poisons you've learned to brew from herbs, insects, even toads. You're taught to aim for the neck, the base of the spine, soft areas where armor fails and fear lives. You carry smoke pellets in your sleeve, not for drama, for escape, for misdirection, for survival. One strike, and you vanish behind a curtain of smoke, slipping into alleyways, rooftops, the belly of the night. Sometimes, if you need something louder, you're trusted with rudimentary explosives, small black powder charges designed to disorient, to scatter enemies, to buy you 6 seconds of shadow. Every one of these tools has a purpose, a weight, a consequence. You're drilled until your muscle memory knows which to reach for without thinking, until your hands move before your eyes do. You practice for hours, blindfolded, in the rain, under duress. You repeat combinations until your palms blister and your arms tremble. Because when it matters, hesitation will kill you. Confusion will kill you. Pride will kill you. You're never praised for skill, only corrected for imperfection. A strike that lands a heartbeat too late is considered a miss. A blade that doesn't cut clean is a failure. The standard is brutal because the battlefield is worse. You don't carry weapons because you're brave. You carry them because you're terrified of what happens if they fail you. And when your fingers close around cold steel again and again, year after year, you start to lose something. Not your grip, not your speed, something deeper. The part of you that used to tremble at the thought of drawing blood, the part of you that used to care. They don't just teach you how to fight, they teach you how to vanish. Disappearance is the highest skill a ninja can master, not just fading into the shadows, but erasing yourself from a situation entirely. That's where the smoke pellets come in. Tiny, round pouches filled with a powdered mixture of ash, sulfur, and crushed plants. You learn how to crack them on the ground, mid-movement, how to let the smoke billow and blind, how to pivot your escape in the heartbeat of confusion. The first time you train with them, your lungs burn. You cough, stumble, fail. You're punished for that. Next time you hold your breath. You move faster. The smoke becomes your cloak. But sometimes smoke isn't enough. So you learn how to use flash charges. Primitive, but effective. They don't explode so much as detonate with light and heat, brief and blinding. You're taught how to time your exits to the second, how to disorient guards, how to cover a sprint through a garden without a single footprint noticed. These aren't toys or distractions. They're lifelines. When everything goes wrong, when you're bleeding and cornered, you don't draw your blade. You draw smoke. You draw light. Because staying alive matters more than staying deadly. These escape tools aren't taught with reverence. They're taught with urgency. Because the instructors know what it means when a mission goes sideways. They know how quickly a silent kill can become a desperate chase. You train to run barefoot across rooftops at full speed. You learn to leap from heights, roll through impact, vanish into reeds, drain tunnels, temple corridors. You memorize escape routes in every environment: forest, town, mountain, river. You don't just know how to run. You know how to disappear without leaving a story behind. And yet, every use of these tools reminds you of something else, that you are always one step from death. Smoke pellets mean you've been seen. Flash grenades mean you've been caught. Escape is survival, yes, but it's also failure. You weren't supposed to need these. You were supposed to be perfect, invisible, unheard. So each time you vanish in smoke, even if you survive, you return to judgment. Why were you detected? Why did you need to run? What did you do wrong? Eventually, you stop thinking of these tricks as clever. You start thinking of them as confessions, symbols of near death, symbols of imperfection. But you carry them anyway, because out there, on the edge of a cliff, with dogs barking and guards closing in, perfection means nothing. What matters is getting away and living long enough to try again. So you learn to love the hiss of the smoke, the sting of the powder, the flash of light behind your eyes. Not because it makes you feel powerful, but because in those brief moments of chaos, you're finally free from rules, from shame, from silence. And sometimes that's the only freedom you get. You're not a soldier, not in the way samurai are. You don't march in formation. You don't wear polished armor or shout battle cries across open fields. You don't stand in the sun, blade raised, waiting for glory. You move in silence, in darkness, under roofs and behind trees. And no matter how many missions you complete, how many secrets you steal, how many lives you end, you'll never be honored for it. No statues, no family crests, no tales sung at temple festivals. You don't even get a name in the stories, because the world doesn't want to remember people like you. It only wants to use you. The samurai stand at the front lines, revered and admired. They write poetry before duels and die with swords in their hands. Their deaths are noble, their causes just. They are warriors by blood, celebrated by birthright. But you're hired, loaned, sent, disposable. You wear rags, not robes. Your sword is hidden, not displayed. You are a shadow behind the banner, a whisper in the enemy's tent, a knife in the dark. And if you die, your name is scrubbed from the ledger. Your body, if recovered, is buried without rights. Because admitting you existed would mean admitting that war isn't always clean. And people prefer their wars clean. There's a reason samurai and ninja rarely eat at the same table. Even when they serve the same lord, the same purpose. The samurai sees you and sees filth, sees deception, cowardice. But you've seen the truth. You've walked past his tent at night while he sleeps soundly, his life protected by the secrets you stole, the people you silenced, the camps you burned. He lives because you don't hesitate. He wins because you're willing to do what he isn't. And yet the shame clings to you. You're not respected. You're feared, distrusted. Even among villagers, you feel it. That wary glance, that subtle step back. They know what you are. Not because you announce it, but because they've heard stories. Stories of the ones who move without sound, who strike without mercy, who vanish like spirits. They're not wrong, but they don't understand either. They think being a ninja is about power. What they never see is the cost. When you walk into a room, heads lower. Not out of reverence, but suspicion. You might be here to spy. You might be here to kill. You might already know their secrets. So you eat alone. You travel alone. You live alone. Not because you choose to, but because you're never allowed to be just a person. And in those moments, passing a samurai in full regalia, watching villagers cheer for a war hero, you realize what you've become. You're not a man. You're a rumor in human skin. A necessary evil. A tool nobody wants to admit they used, but someone always does. There's no pride in being at the bottom. No honor in being a necessity people pretend to despise. You're not invited to court. You're not offered wine or poetry scrolls. You're not asked to recount your victories because your victories must remain invisible. In the strict ladder of feudal Japan, you are beneath the merchant, beneath the farmer, even beneath the wandering ronin with a rusted blade. You don't own land. You don't wear colors. You don't even walk through town without measuring each step, wondering who's watching, who's whispering, who's already judging you. Samurai wear silk and steel. You wear silence. They die in open battle. You vanish without applause. Even among those who hire you, there is no respect, only utility. You are summoned, instructed, dismissed, like a lantern lit only when needed, then snuffed out. When the task is complete, your name is not remembered, it is erased. Your mission is successful only when no one knows you were ever there. And so the more effective you become, the more invisible you remain. You save lives without thanks, win wars without mention. And when peace finally arrives, they'll say it was the generals, the daimyo, the brave warriors, but never you. The samurai are trained to value death with honor. You are trained to avoid death at all costs, because your death is not a sacrifice. It's just a loss of inventory. You are never expected to die well. You are only expected to not fail. And the irony is cruel. The more you survive, the less you matter. The longer you last, the more missions you complete, the more the people around you expect your silence, your obedience, your disappearance. And the worst part is, the hatred is by design. They don't want to respect you. They need to look down on you. Because if they acknowledged your skill, your sacrifice, your raw efficiency, they'd have to face the truth. That you are better at surviving than they are. That your path is harder, darker, lonelier. That the code they cling to, the honor, the rituals, the clean lines of battle, is built on your blood. So they call you dishonorable to protect their pride. And you let them. Because arguing gets you nowhere. Because the blade in your hand is never for show. Because they don't have to respect you. They just have to fear you enough to keep hiring you. You move through life like a shadow cast by someone else's fire. Never seen, never praised, never allowed to claim the space you've earned. You've learned not to expect a nod, a word, a glance. You've learned that people only look at you when they need something done that no one else can do. And when it's over, they look away again. That's the curse of being necessary, but unloved. You walk the earth as a phantom, present in every war, absent from every story. You don't just sneak into castles or shadow enemy patrols. Sometimes you have to become them. Deep cover infiltration, the most dangerous and most consuming part of your craft. It's one thing to wear a disguise for an hour or a day. It's another to live it for weeks, to inhabit a false name, sleep under a false roof, speak in a false dialect, and pray at the wrong shrine. To laugh at the jokes of the people you're going to kill. To eat the food of the clan you're going to betray. That kind of deception isn't just performance. It's poison. Slow, invisible, and inevitable. You take on the role of a merchant, a traveling monk, a distant cousin from a fabricated lineage, whatever it takes. You learn to track not just your own story, but everyone else's. You memorize town gossip so you don't contradict it. You learn the habits of gate guards, the routines of cooks, the rhythms of servants' bells. You are not there to fight. You are there to listen, to wait, to blend. And the longer you do, the more dangerous it becomes. Every day, your odds of discovery increase. Every night, you wonder if the knock at the door is someone bringing tea or steel. You can't afford to be wrong even once. A glance too sharp, a name mispronounced, a ritual gesture made with the wrong hand. It's all it takes. And when suspicion comes, it comes fast. You're taught to have at least 3 exit routes memorized at all times. You sleep with 1 foot out of your bedroll, 1 hand near the blade. If your cover is blown, You don't try to explain. You don't hesitate. You disappear. And yet the mission is rarely so clean, because you're not just pretending to be someone else. You're living it. You share meals with these people. You talk about the weather. You help carry firewood. You listen to their worries about taxes and marriages and winter grain. And some part of you, no matter how disciplined, starts to feel the weight of that. Starts to forget, even briefly, that they are your enemy. Starts to imagine, just for a moment, what it would be like to stay. But you can't. Because one day, the message arrives, the signal, the time to act. And when it does, you do what you were trained to do. You deliver poison into the well. You draw the blade across the neck of the man who gave you food 3 nights ago. You set the fire and walk away as screams tear through the night air. You don't look back. You can't afford to. When you return to your handlers, there's no talk of what it felt like. Only a nod. Only the next name. The next disguise. You bury what you felt. You lock it somewhere deep inside. Because if you let it surface, if you let yourself feel it for even a second, you might never be able to put the mask back on again. Trust is not a luxury in your world. It's a threat. You're told this from the beginning, but the lesson doesn't sink in until it's too late, until the betrayal comes from someone who trained beside you, someone whose breathing rhythm you memorized, whose footsteps you could recognize in the dark, whose silence once brought you comfort. And when they turn on you, it doesn't happen with a scream or a fight. It happens with a look, a missed signal, a delay in a planned escape, a door that doesn't open when it should. That's how betrayal happens here, quietly, like everything else. Because the truth is, everyone's expendable, everyone's replaceable. The clan doesn't reward loyalty, it rewards results. And if you fail, even once, they'll choose someone else. Maybe even the person standing beside you. That's how it works. When someone close to you vanishes, you're not sure if they died in the field or were removed by the clan. You're not supposed to know. You're not supposed to ask. You just nod and carry on while something in your chest burns colder. Sometimes betrayal comes from above, from your own masters. You're given a mission with missing details. You're sent in with faulty intelligence. And when you fail, there's no rescue, no extraction. You weren't set up to succeed, you were sent as bait, a distraction, or worse, a test for someone else. And when you survive it, if you survive it, you come back different. Not just wounded, hollowed. You begin to understand that loyalty is not reciprocal. You give everything, and in return, you get silence. And silence here means permission. Permission to be discarded, to be replaced. The paranoia starts slow, a lingering glance, a sentence that feels too careful, a teammate who arrives a second too late. You stop sleeping near others. You stop turning your back, even to drink. You develop habits, always facing the door, always sitting closest to the exit, always checking your rations for strange tastes or smells. You don't call it fear, you call it preparation. But deep down, you know, you're not preparing for the enemy. You're preparing for the day your own people decide you're more useful dead. And yet, you still do the work. You still follow the orders. Because there's no other life waiting for you. Because even if you wanted to leave, where would you go? You've burned every bridge. You've lived too long in shadows to survive in the light. So you keep your head down. You nod at your comrades, even when you wonder what they're hiding. You train harder. You move quieter. You kill faster. Because in a world where anyone could betray you, The only person you can truly rely on is the one who's already half gone. And as the years stretch on, betrayal becomes just another part of the job. Expected, anticipated, like a trap you've already stepped into, but learned to stop struggling against. Because struggling, after all, only makes it louder. They teach you everything: how to fight, how to kill, how to vanish. You learn to master poisons, traps, fire, disguise. You memorize the weight of every weapon, the sound of every floorboard, the taste of every lie. By the time you've reached your late teens, there's almost nothing you can't do. You're faster than a thief, more precise than a soldier, more disciplined than a monk. And yet, for all your training, all your skill, all your unbroken silence, there's one thing they never teach you: how to live. You know how to take life, but not how to build one. You can infiltrate a palace, but not a friendship. You can steal a secret from behind enemy lines, but you can't have a conversation without wondering what the other person wants from you. You've mastered the art of survival, but not the art of being human. And when the mission ends, when the blade is sheathed, when the escape is made, you're left alone with a body that only knows tension and a mind that only knows caution. You walk like someone is watching. You eat like the food might be poisoned. You sleep like you might not wake up, because that's all you've ever known. There's no training for peace, no drills for kindness, no lesson on how to stop scanning every room for threats. And when, rarely, there's a break in the missions, you don't know what to do with it. You sit by yourself in the corner of the compound, sharpening a blade that doesn't need sharpening. You patch clothing that isn't torn. You clean tools already clean. Not because you're diligent, but because the silence outside your mind is nothing compared to the noise inside it. You've spent your life becoming a weapon, but weapons have no purpose outside of war. You try to imagine another path. Could you become a farmer, a monk, a merchant? Could you raise a family, tell stories, laugh without watching the door? But even those thoughts feel dangerous, because dreaming is a kind of weakness. And if someone hears weakness in your voice, even once, you're done. And so you stop imagining. You bury any thought of escape beneath your routines, the breath work, the blade forms, the memorized poisons. These are the things you cling to, not because they bring meaning, but because they are familiar, because they are all you have. You may be a master of 10,000 techniques, but when it comes to joy, peace, or freedom, you are a novice. You're more confident on rooftops than in daylight. You'd rather hide than be seen. Because deep down, you suspect you don't exist outside the mission. That without orders, without danger, you're nothing. And that may be the cruelest truth of all. You've become so good at surviving that you've forgotten how to live. It's not enough to know how to fight. You also have to know how to kill slowly, quietly, with no trace. That's where the poison comes in. Your training in the art of toxins begins early, long before you understand what it really means to watch someone die from the inside. You learn to identify the right leaves, the right roots, the right insects. You memorize which combinations cause nausea, which cause paralysis, which stop the heart mid-sentence. Some are fast and loud, choking, seizures, blood on the floor. Others are slow and delicate, just a fever, just a cough, just a sudden stillness after dinner. To the outside world, they look like illness. To you, they look like success. You're taught to dose with precision. One drop too much and your target dies too soon, drawing attention. Too little, and they survive long enough to start asking questions. You train your hand to be steady even when the consequences shake your spine. You practice on animals, then eventually on people, prisoners, traitors, or sometimes just those the clan has deemed expendable. No name, no story, just a test. You drop the poison into their tea. You wait. You watch. And when they clutch their stomach or start to sweat or gasp for air, you note the time, the symptoms, the silence afterward. The tools are everywhere, hidden in rings, combs, ink, even the threads of your clothing. You can turn a sweet rice cake into a death sentence, a cup of sake into an execution. Your breath itself, if trained right, can blow a poison dart that ends a life in seconds. The elegance of it is horrifying. There's no screaming, no blood, just stillness. And afterward, no one remembers that you were there. But the more you master it, the more it corrodes something in you. Because poison is different from the blade. With a sword, you meet your enemy face to face. There's a moment, however brief, of shared recognition, a kind of honesty in the violence. But poison, it's intimate and cowardly all at once. It requires you to be near, to serve, to smile while hiding your true purpose. And it demands patience. You must watch the life drain away slowly, act surprised, comfort the dying, and then walk away as if nothing happened. You learn to mimic grief. You practice your expressions in the mirror, the right look of shock, of concern, of innocence. Eventually, you forget how to mean any of it. And what's worse is knowing how easily it could be turned on you. That tea you were offered this morning, that dumpling, that incense burning in the corner, it could just as easily be your own ending, carefully prepared by someone with hands as steady as yours. Because poison is the great equalizer. It makes every meal a gamble, every scent a threat. And for a ninja, that means every breath could be your last. Sometimes silence isn't enough. Sometimes shadows aren't enough. Sometimes the only way to finish the mission is with fire. You're taught to see flame not as destruction, but as strategy, a tool, a message, a clean erasure. Where a blade takes a life, fire takes everything. It consumes evidence, obliterates hiding places, collapses strongholds. When a problem can't be quietly removed, you make sure there's nothing left to find. And so you're trained in the art of arson, not wild chaos, but controlled demolition. You don't just start fires, you design them. The first time you're sent to burn a building, it feels like overkill. You've already gathered the information. You've marked the target. You've slipped out unnoticed. But the command is clear. Leave nothing behind. So you double back, soaking paper walls with oil, stuffing firecrackers in the roof beams. You time it precisely. One spark, one flash, and it goes up like dry grass in summer. You vanish into the tree line as screams rise behind you. No one sees your face. No one ever does. From that point forward, fire becomes another language in your arsenal. It's not just a way to kill, it's a way to signal. A flare on a distant hill tells your allies the job is done. A slow-burning trail of embers diverts enemy patrols. A sudden blaze sows chaos while you escape through a back gate. You learn how to read smoke. White, black, oily, clean. You can tell how long a fire's been burning, what it's devoured, and whether someone escaped it. And more importantly, you learn how to set one so that they don't escape. It's a power that comes with a cost, because once you start using fire, you can't look away from what it does. You hear it crack buildings apart. You hear people coughing inside, panicking, clawing at walls. You hear animals trapped in barns. You hear the unmistakable silence after it ends. The job was clean. The target was eliminated. But the fire didn't stop at the mission. It kept going. And you lit the match. That night you smell the soot in your hair and wonder who else died, who wasn't meant to, who wasn't named in your orders. And then you wonder if it matters. Because the only thing you're ever asked is, did the building fall? Was the objective met? No one talks about the family next door, the servant who slept in the wrong room, the baby whose crying you heard just before the smoke turned to screams. You try not to think about it. You tell yourself it was necessary. That fire is just another tool. But deep down, you know it's not true. Because fire doesn't whisper. It doesn't sneak. It roars. And even long after it's burned out, the memory of it lingers on your skin, in your nose, and somewhere deep inside where no water can ever reach. Some missions are over in minutes, a quick strike, a clean escape. Others take weeks. You arrive in a town under a different name, with different clothes, a backstory rehearsed down to the details. Who your uncle is, where you grew up, what temple you visited on the way. You live in a borrowed house, sleep on a borrowed mat, eat borrowed food, and pretend you belong. You smile at neighbors, chat with merchants, bow at the right times. No one suspects a thing. That's the goal, to exist among the enemy as if you're one of them. To blend so well that even you start to forget where the performance ends. Living under cover isn't just a skill, it's a test of endurance. You become your false identity completely for days or weeks or even months at a time. Every word you speak is calculated, every gesture rehearsed. The language you use, the way you sit, how you hold your chopsticks, it all has to match the role. A single slip, and it could all unravel. You live with your heart clenched, waiting for someone to see through you, waiting for the mistake that exposes everything. The worst part is how normal it can feel. You get used to the rhythm of it, the neighbor who gives you leftover fish, the innkeeper who waves good morning, the children who chase each other through the square while you sit and pretend to be someone harmless. You almost feel human again. You almost believe you belong. But it's all temporary. You're not here to live. You're here to listen, watch, wait. One wrong turn in the enemy's conversation, one slip in their defenses, and that's when you act. And when the signal comes, it always feels like a betrayal. Not of them, of yourself. Because even if you never cared, even if you kept your heart frozen, you've still been there. You've still eaten with them. Shared space, shared silence. And then you do what you were sent to do. You leave the back gate open for a midnight raid. You poison the teapot. You smother someone in their sleep. You vanish before dawn, but the village doesn't. It burns, or bleeds, or simply wakes up to one less person. When you return, you're not congratulated, you're debriefed, you're corrected for what you could have done better. And then you're assigned a new identity, a new face, a new home. You're told to go again. And you do. But each time, something stays behind. A scent, a face, a laugh. You remember the child who shared a rice cake with you, the old woman who called you son, the man you lied to every day until he was dead. You're told not to carry those things, but they cling to you anyway, like smoke in your clothes. And long after the mission ends, long after the village is just a shadow in your past, you still dream in someone else's name. You sleep like prey. Even when you're safe, especially when you're safe, you never quite let go. Your mat is always nearest the door. Your blade, never out of arm's reach. Your ears stay tuned to every creak, every whisper of wind outside the shutters. You're not resting. You're waiting. Because sleep isn't an escape in this life. It's a vulnerability. And you've been taught from the beginning that vulnerability gets you killed. When the missions first started, you told yourself you'd get used to it, that the anxiety would wear off, that your body would adjust. But years later, it hasn't. Every night, your muscles stay half tensed, ready to spring. You close your eyes, but you don't drift. You sink into memories, into fears, into the rehearsed plans of how to escape if someone comes through the roof, or if smoke creeps in through the floorboards. You map exits in your mind. You sleep lightly enough to wake at the sound of a sparrow landing outside. It's not just training anymore. It's your default state. And it follows you even when you're not in the field. Back at the compound, among your own, the fear doesn't leave. Because your own isn't a phrase that means safety here. It means people who might be watching, testing, evaluating your usefulness. You've seen assassinations carried out in bunk rooms. You've seen poison show up in communal meals. You've seen trusted companions disappear in the middle of the night, never to return. You never assume you're safe. You never assume the silence is peace. Sometimes silence just means the enemy hasn't struck yet. The consequences of this vigilance aren't small. Your health deteriorates slowly. Your joints ache. Your vision blurs in the mornings. Your thoughts move like molasses by midday. But you don't get to complain. Fatigue is a sign of weakness, and weakness is always punished. So you push through. You train harder. You run drills on no sleep. You walk barefoot across stone floors to keep your blood moving. Anything to prove that you're still sharp, that you're still useful. And the dreams, they're not dreams anymore. They're repetitions, replays, missions you lived through but didn't really leave, faces of the dead, sounds you can't forget. You wake up soaked in sweat, hands clenched, throat raw from a scream that never came out. And still, when someone asks how you slept, you nod. You say, fine. You always say, fine. Because the truth that you're breaking, that you're fraying, that the walls are getting thinner, isn't something you can afford to admit. Not out loud, not even to yourself. You were trained to move through the world like a shadow. But shadows too need rest. And when they don't get it, they grow thin, weak, transparent. And sooner or later, they vanish. You've told so many lies that you've started to forget what the truth feels like. At first, the lies were just assignments, false names, false pasts, stories crafted to fool your enemies. But over time, they became something else. They became you. Every day you wake up and slide into a persona like armor. You wear it through breakfast, through conversations, through entire missions. Sometimes you even wear it when you're alone. Not because you have to, but because you don't remember how to take it off. You've been a farmer with a sick wife, a monk seeking donations for a ruined temple, a traveling craftsman with stories from the provinces. You've smiled and bowed and spoken in dialects that don't belong to you. And each time, you become convincing. So convincing, in fact, that people open their homes to you. They speak to you like family. They believe. And that belief is your weapon. You twist it into advantage. You store their kindness like ammunition. Because eventually, you'll betray it. You always do. But the longer you do this, the more the lines blur. You forget if a memory was real or part of a role. You confuse dreams with assignments. You wake up in cold sweats, calling out names you made up yourself. You stare into the mirror and see not one face but dozens, each one a role, a mission, a piece of yourself carved away and replaced. You begin to realize that you've constructed so many false identities that the real one is gone. You are a house of masks, and you no longer know what's underneath. It isn't just disorienting, it's dangerous. Because when you're living a lie for long enough, you start to want it. You start to believe that maybe you could just be that person. just this once. Maybe you could put the blade away. Maybe you could stop checking over your shoulder. Maybe you could have a life. But that fantasy is always short-lived. The signal always comes. The order always arrives. And the person you were pretending to be has to vanish, burned down along with whatever attachments you let grow. You begin to hate the lies, not because they're hard to tell, but because they feel better than the truth. Because the lie is that you are someone with a future. The lie is that you are someone worth loving. The lie is that this ends in anything but death. And yet you cling to them, these fictions, like a man clinging to driftwood in a storm. Because when the mission ends and the mask comes off, there's nothing left underneath but a silence too deep to fill. They trained you to become anyone, but they never taught you how to be yourself. And now, after years of becoming shadows of other people, you wonder if the real you was ever there to begin with, or if he died long ago in the first lie you told too well. You're not even a man yet, but you've already killed more people than you can count. You've slipped blades through sleeping ribs, watched poison take its slow grip, set fires that swallowed lives you never saw. And the strange part, the part that terrifies you most, is how normal it feels now. How it doesn't shake your hands like it used to. How you can walk away from a corpse without your breath hitching. That kind of numbness doesn't come all at once. It creeps in, slow, patient, like the very death you deal. You still remember your first kill, the way your heart raced, the panic, the surge of adrenaline so strong it left you trembling for hours. But now, you execute a mission, report it, clean your blade, and move on. The world doesn't pause. Your instructors don't pause. So why should you? There's always another name, another face, another soft target with no idea what's coming. At this point, you're more ritual than person, just a set of practice movements. Enter, strike, vanish. And yet, you're still a child. No matter how many scars mark your skin, how many lessons you've internalized, you haven't lived long enough to know what peace feels like. You've never fallen in love, never had a real conversation that didn't involve manipulation. You don't know what it means to feel safe. Everything you are has been built on survival and silence. You've never had the chance to become anything else. No one talks about the children who kill. They whisper about prodigies. They admire efficiency. But no one wants to face what it means when a 12-year-old can slip into a guarded home and leave a body behind. They don't want to think about the kind of childhood that leads to that moment, the kind of training, the kind of trauma. They want to believe that you're exceptional, that you're proud, but you're not. You're tired, you're shrinking. You're becoming smaller with every life you take. And worse, there's no way back. You can't unsee what you've seen. You can't make your hands clean again. Even if you stopped today, you'd still carry the weight of it all. The dreams wouldn't stop. The memories wouldn't fade. The faces would still stare at you in the dark, even if you can't remember their names. You don't cry. There's no room for that. You don't talk to anyone. They wouldn't understand. Or worse, they would. Because they're just like you. Kids in grown-up bodies with nothing left to lose but their orders. You're part of a generation bred for silence, and death is your native tongue. So you keep moving. Keep killing. Keep pretending that this is strength. That being numb is the same thing as being fearless. But somewhere in the back of your mind, there's a whisper you can't ignore. If this is what it means to be powerful, why do you feel so small? The blade was heavier than you expected. Not physically, it was short, balanced, perfectly honed. But when you held it for the first time in the stillness before a kill, the weight of it wasn't in the steel. It was in your hands, in the way they shook, just slightly, in the way your breath paused before you stepped forward. You were 9, maybe 10. And the man sleeping in front of you had no idea his life was down to its last seconds. No one talks about the first time like this. They talk about how clean the strike was, how quickly you escaped, how precise your movements were. But they don't talk about what it felt like to stand there, tiny fingers wrapped around a weapon made for death, and know, truly know, that you're about to end something permanent. That once you step forward, there's no undoing it. They call it a rite of passage. You call it the moment your childhood was carved away, piece by piece, with the same blade you used to end his life. Afterward, you expected to feel something: regret, horror, maybe pride. But what you felt was nothing. Just a kind of blankness. You were praised. Quietly, of course. A nod. A gesture. The blade was taken from you and wiped clean. You were given rice that night. A little more than usual. It tasted like dust. You told yourself that the silence was strength. That not crying made you powerful. That not feeling anything was a sign you were ready. But you knew, deep down, that it wasn't true. Because it did affect you. Just not in the way you expected. It didn't shatter you. It eroded you. It made you quieter, slower to smile. You started watching people differently, looking at their throats, their backs, their habits. You stopped making eye contact, not just with targets, but with everyone. Because once you know how fragile life is, how easily it can be taken away, it changes how you see the world. You don't see people anymore. You see vulnerabilities, patterns, weaknesses, escape routes. That first kill never really leaves. Even after the 100th, it sits in a corner of your memory, untouched. You remember the angle of the moonlight, the way his foot twitched as he died, the smell of the room, something sweet and rotten, like incense and old cloth. And no matter how many bodies you leave behind after that, that first one stays sharp, like the blade, like you. You tell yourself it was necessary. You tell yourself that if you hadn't done it, someone else would have. You repeat the lessons they gave you. The mission matters more than the man. A clean kill saves lives in the long run. But when you lie awake at night, you still see him, not as an enemy, just as a man who never saw you coming. And that's the part that lingers. Not the act, not the blood, but the silence afterward. The fact that no one mourned, that no one even asked his name. You go in alone. You come out alone. That's the way it's always been. There's no unit, no brotherhood, no one to watch your back while you scale a wall or slip through a sleeping compound. You are a solitary figure in a world of whispers, trained to need nothing and trust no one. And when things go wrong, and they often do, there's no cavalry coming over the hill, no backup creeping through the trees. If you fail, you vanish, quietly, completely. The only sound marking your end might be the wind shifting through bamboo, and no one will come looking. At first, it's frightening, this absolute solitude. You feel the weight of it during your earliest missions, when your hands still sweat before a kill, and you catch yourself flinching at every unfamiliar noise. You scan every corner twice, maybe 3 times. You rehearse escape routes until you dream of them. and the fear becomes part of the ritual, a silent companion that never leaves. But over time, you stop noticing it, not because you've overcome it, but because you've grown around it, like a tree growing crooked around a nail hammered into its trunk. You stop looking over your shoulder for help. You stop expecting the signal of a teammate in the shadows. You train yourself to do everything: entry, surveillance, elimination, escape, without relying on another soul. If the rope snaps, you tie another. If the plan collapses, you make a new one mid-step. And when the blood runs, yours or someone else's, you bind the wound yourself, clench your teeth, and move forward. Because hesitating means dying, and dying means being forgotten. You eat alone, you travel alone, you kill alone. The only voices you hear on a mission are the ones inside your head, calculating, doubting, remembering. You get used to the echo of your own thoughts. You learn to breathe quietly enough to hear a leaf turn in the wind. There's a strange clarity in it, a sharpened awareness. You become something less than a man and more than a shadow, an observer, a ghost, a silent consequence. And while the world continues around you, merchants haggling, priests chanting, guards laughing, you move untouched by it all. Not because they don't see you, but because you were never supposed to be there in the first place. But the solitude carves deep. You feel it most after the mission. When the adrenaline fades and the silence turns heavy instead of useful. When there's no one to speak to, no one to confide in, no one to say, "That was close." You return to your compound and sleep in a room lined with other ghosts who won't look you in the eye. Because they know. They've been there too. And in that quiet, you wonder if maybe it's not the danger that wears you down. Maybe it's the aloneness. The way it turns your victories into silence, your survival into shame. Because no matter how many missions you finish, there's no one waiting for you on the other side. Just more silence. There is no finish line. No moment where you set the blade down and say, "That was the last one." Being a ninja is not a role you retire from. It's a sentence. One mission blurs into the next. One disguise fades into another. There's always another target, another message to intercept, another wall to climb, another order whispered under cover of night. You live on borrowed time, moving from task to task, your life measured not in years, but in assignments. There is no end, only a pause, a breath, then the next job. You don't even realize how deep the cycle has consumed you until you try to rest. You're given a week between missions, no assignments, no training, nothing but silence. And you don't know what to do with it. You pace. You sharpen your blade for the third time that day. You check doors and windows for enemies that aren't there. Because without the mission, you feel like a blade left unsheathed, useless, twitching, dangerous to hold. You've built your entire identity around function. Take the function away, and what's left? You ask your handler quietly if there's anything that needs doing. They shake their head. You nod, even though your chest tightens at the answer. That night, you lie awake staring at the ceiling, waiting for a sound that never comes. Sleep feels wrong, like you're wasting time, like your instincts are rusting with every hour of stillness. When morning comes, you run drills alone until your muscles scream. Not because you want to improve, but because routine is the only thing keeping your thoughts in check. When the next mission comes, you don't feel dread. You feel relief. Not because you enjoy the kill, but because action is clarity. When you're infiltrating an enemy garrison or scaling a wall under moonlight, you know who you are. You don't have to ask questions. The mission tells you what to do. The enemy tells you where to go. Your blade tells you when it's over, and yet the repetition wears on you. Each kill feels less significant. Each escape feels emptier. The first time you poisoned a well, you counted the hours until your target collapsed. The last time, you didn't even watch. You slipped the powder into the pot, turned your back, and left. Not because it was easier, but because it didn't matter. You've started to lose track of names, of reasons. The people you eliminate aren't traitors or threats anymore. They're assignments, points on a map, tasks to complete before nightfall. You wonder, in your quietest moments, how many missions it takes before you vanish completely, before there's no you left, just the role, the skill set, the motion of the job. You suspect the answer is zero, that the real you may have vanished the day you accepted your first order, and every mission since has just buried the body deeper. There comes a point when you stop seeing the difference between right and wrong, not because you've become evil, but because the lines were never meant to be clear in your world. In the beginning, they told you your enemies deserved to die, that the people you were targeting were traitors, spies, threats to peace. And maybe that was true. Maybe some of them were. But the older you get, the more those stories begin to change. Targets shift, motives blur. You begin to wonder if what you're doing is justice or just convenience for someone with more power than you'll ever have. You're told to eliminate a merchant in a town you've never heard of. You do it, clean and fast, only to find out later that he wasn't a traitor, just someone who refused to pay a bribe. You're ordered to burn a storehouse full of food, and only after the flames settle do you hear that it was meant for famine relief in a nearby village. These aren't mistakes. They're intentions. Carefully calculated, ruthlessly delivered, and you were the blade that made them real. You didn't ask. You didn't question. Because that's not your place. Your place is the shadow, the silent hand, the means, never the reason. But the questions come anyway. Late at night, between assignments. When your hands are clean, but your thoughts aren't. You start to remember faces. The way the merchant looked up just before your blade slipped between his ribs. The sound of children coughing as smoke filled the village. You tell yourself it's not your job to understand the politics, that you're just a tool, but tools break. And when they do, they're thrown away. So how long can you keep functioning without shattering from the inside? There's no one to talk to about this. No priest, no elder, no friend. Everyone around you is wearing the same mask. If they feel what you feel, they're better at hiding it. Or maybe they buried it long ago. You try to push it down, to focus on form and breathing and precision. But the doubt keeps bleeding through the cracks. Not loud, just enough to sting. And still, you keep going. Because what else is there? If you stop following orders, you become the next target. If you speak out, no one listens. So you play your part. You bow when commanded. You kill when instructed. And you convince yourself that maybe it doesn't matter, that maybe none of it ever did. Because if it did matter, if you're really responsible for all the things they've asked you to do, then the weight of that is too much for one man to carry. You begin to understand something awful, that the deeper you go into this life, the more you must become indifferent to it. Because if you let yourself care again, you'll drown. And there's no rescue waiting. Only another mission. Sometimes the mission doesn't come from above. Sometimes it comes with a name you already know, a face you trained beside, a voice you've heard in the dark during shared patrols or sleepless nights. You're handed a scroll, you open it, and your stomach drops, because the target isn't a stranger. It's someone who once mattered, someone who might still matter, even if you'd never admit it out loud. That's when you learn that loyalty has an expiration date. And when it does, you're the one expected to end it. There's no room for hesitation. They're testing you as much as they're eliminating someone else. Maybe that person disobeyed. Maybe they spoke too freely. Or maybe they simply failed. You'll never be told the reason. Only the name. Only the route. Only the time you're expected to strike. And if you ask questions, your name might be the next one inked in silence. So you carry out the order, because that's what you've been trained to do. You follow your old comrade through a crowded street. You wait until they're alone. You make it clean. You don't speak. You don't let them see your face, though part of you wants them to. Part of you wants them to know it was you. Not out of cruelty, but out of some strange instinct that demands acknowledgement, recognition. But you don't allow it. You strike from behind, like always. And when they fall, you catch them, just enough to keep them from crying out. That night you eat in silence. You wash your hands until your skin stings. You replay the moment again and again. Not the kill, the second before. The moment where you almost said something, almost hesitated, almost betrayed the mission. That's the part that stays with you. There's no comfort waiting for you after. No one pulls you aside to say, "We know that was hard." They don't need to. They know if you were strong enough to do it, you're strong enough to carry it alone. And if you're not, well, they'll find out soon enough. The absence will begin to rot you from the inside, and eventually you'll make a mistake. You'll hesitate. You'll break. And then someone else will get a scroll with your name on it. After that, everyone becomes a potential assignment. You stop forming attachments altogether. You speak only when spoken to. You stop remembering birthdays, inside jokes, old stories from the training yard. Because anything you build here in this life is temporary. Everything you know can be weaponized against you. Every bond can be severed without warning. Every friend can become a corpse with your blade in their back. And when that happens, there's no forgiveness, no closure, no chance to explain that you didn't want to, that you had to. There's only silence. And another mark burned into your soul. This time not from an enemy, but from someone who once called you brother. You're never the one deciding what needs to be done. You're the blade, not the hand. The puppet, not the puppeteer. Your masters give the orders, and you obey. Not because you agree, not because you understand, but because obedience is what keeps you breathing. Every mission is delivered without context, no explanations, no reasons, just a name, a location, a deadline, and you carry it out with the precision they've carved into your bones. You never ask why, because why is dangerous. Why makes you think, and thinking gets you killed. But the truth is hard to ignore. The longer you serve, the more patterns you start to see. You notice how some targets are political rivals, how others are innocent witnesses, how entire villages vanish after routine reconnaissance. You start to see that the mission isn't always about justice or stability. Sometimes it's about power, control, fear, and the realization hits harder than any blade. You've been used, again and again, not for honor, not for peace, but to maintain someone else's position, to silence threats, not enemies, to destroy dissent, not danger. You begin to suspect that even your loyalty has been manipulated, that your fear of failure, your need to obey, your silence, none of it is a virtue. It's all design. They built you this way. From childhood, you were taught that questioning authority was betrayal, that hesitation was death, that your life belonged to the clan, to the mission. And so you never learned to trust your instincts. You learned to bury them. but now they're surfacing. During missions, you start to hesitate, just for a second, just long enough to wonder, is this person really guilty? Am I solving a problem or covering one up? You know better than to voice these thoughts. You keep them buried beneath blank expressions and bowed heads, but they simmer, quietly, constantly. A pressure that builds behind your eyes, in the pit of your chest. You wonder if your masters can see it, if they already know, if they're watching, waiting for you to falter. The missions continue. You obey. Outwardly, nothing changes. But inside, something's cracked. You can't unsee what you've seen. You can't unfeel the doubt. You can't ignore the possibility that you've never truly known who the real enemy was. And worse, you begin to suspect that they don't even care, that your effectiveness matters more than your clarity, that the people giving the orders are just as lost, just as desperate to maintain control, no matter the cost. And so you keep moving forward, not because you believe, but because belief was never part of the job. You were trained to carry out commands, to function, to kill. Whether the target deserves it or not, that's not your problem. That's not your decision. It never has been. You are the knife. And the knife doesn't get to choose. Nothing you have is really yours, not your name, not your face, not even your memories, not the real ones. Everything was given to you, molded for you, or taken away. You were born with a family name, maybe even a nickname whispered by your mother once, long ago. But those things were stripped from you the moment training began. You were renamed, reclassified, turned into a number, a rank, a tool. And you accepted it because you were too young to know what you were losing. Your body isn't yours either. It belongs to the clan, shaped by their punishments, conditioned by their drills. Your muscles remember the forms before your mind does. Your reflexes were installed like clockwork. If they say jump, you're already in the air. If they say kill, your hand moves before your conscience can catch up. You're praised when you bleed without complaint, when you endure without rest, when you silence every instinct that says this hurts. Because pain isn't a warning, it's a test. And failing that test means replacement, or worse. Your thoughts? Not yours either. Every decision you make has already been made for you. What you eat, when you sleep, who you trust. The lessons are embedded deep. They don't need guards to keep you inside. The walls are already built in your mind. You've been taught that disobedience is weakness, that questioning is betrayal, that mercy is a liability. Even when you doubt, when your gut twists with unease, you swallow it. Because you're not paid to think. You're paid to disappear. Even your time isn't yours. You don't own your mornings, your evenings, your future. There's always a mission on the horizon. Always a name coming down the chain. You can't make plans. You can't build a life. Every relationship you form is one more thing they can take away. And they will. They always do. You might spend weeks building trust in a village, only to be told to burn it down. You might spend months posing as someone's brother, only to slip poison into their tea. It's never your choice. It's never about you. And if one day you vanish on a mission, in a mistake, from illness or injury, there will be no mourning, no grave, no record. Someone else will take your place. Use your tools. Sleep in your mat. Carry out your next assignment. And no one will speak your name again because it was never your name to begin with. You were born a person. You became a purpose. And then you became a possession. So you stop clinging to anything, not to belongings, not to people, not even to hope. You travel light. You sleep light. You live light because you know how easily things are taken. And the fewer things you love, the fewer things they can use to hurt you. Loyalty is the currency they pay you in, but it's never worth what it costs. You give everything, your childhood, your body, your choices, and in return, your promised purpose. You're told that your loyalty makes you strong, that it binds you to something greater, that your sacrifice means stability, honor, even legacy. But over time, you realize those promises were only ever useful to the people above you. To them, your loyalty isn't noble, it's convenient. The truth is simpler and colder. You are only as valuable as your last mission. As long as you succeed, you are useful. As long as you obey, you are protected. But the moment you fail, hesitate, or begin to think too much, you're no longer a trusted weapon. You're a liability. And liabilities don't get second chances. You see it happen to others before it happens to you. A ninja returns injured, limping from a botched escape. He's told to rest, to recover. Then he's reassigned to a mission far beyond his current capacity, one he never returns from. Another misses a signal during an infiltration. He's found 2 days later with a blade in his throat and no message left behind. The message is in the silence. Everyone understands. Loyalty flows up the chain, but it does not trickle back down. You begin to question what your loyalty is really buying. You've never had a say in the missions, never known the full reasons behind the targets. You don't own land. You don't hold rank. You're not allowed to marry outside the order. You're not even allowed to leave. And yet they expect you to kill, to bleed, to die, without hesitation and without question. What kind of loyalty is that? You ask yourself, would they come for you if you were captured? Would they ransom you if you were taken? The answer is always no. If you fall into enemy hands, your orders are clear. Die before you talk. Swallow the poison pellet hidden in your collar. If you can't, then pray the enemy is merciful, because your own clan will not be. They won't negotiate. They won't even acknowledge you were theirs. And still you remain, not because you believe, but because belief is a luxury you were never afforded. You stay because the alternative, abandoning everything you've known, everyone you've been trained to be, is unthinkable. You don't know what life looks like without loyalty. You don't know who you are without it. So you keep the mask on. You follow the orders. You whisper the oaths you were taught as a child, even if the words feel hollow now. Because loyalty, for all its emptiness, is still safer than freedom. At least when you're loyal, you know what to expect. Betrayal, after all, always feels worse when you didn't see it coming. If you make it to 25, you're already considered old. Not wise, not seasoned, just lucky. Most don't get that far. Some die on their first mission. Others disappear between towns, cut down by guards or rival clans. A few vanish without explanation, lost to betrayal, exposure, or politics. But if you're one of the rare ones who survive beyond the peak training years, you're not celebrated. You're overused. Sent on the hardest missions, the longest infiltrations, the deadliest tasks, because you're the best. And being the best just means you're sent to die slower. At 25, your body still works, but you feel every bruise longer. Every rooftop landing jars your knees a little more. Every sprint through mud pulls harder at muscles that were once fluid. Your hands don't shake, but they ache after a kill. And yet they keep giving you more weight, more risk, more impossible odds, because they assume you can take it. And if you can't, well, there are younger ones waiting to prove they can. You don't have time to think about what this means. You're too busy staying alive. You wake up before the sun, eat in silence, practice your forms, and slip into whatever disguise the day demands. You're sent into enemy territory, tasked with assassinating generals, dismantling supply chains, or retrieving secrets buried behind layers of deception. There are no vacations, no celebrations, no medals. You are a ghost, summoned only when needed and ignored the moment you succeed. But the toll builds. You start to notice the damage. Your joints crack when you crouch. The old wound on your shoulder opens again after a long climb. Your breath shortens. Your eyes tire faster. And though no one says it aloud, you can feel it. Your expiration date approaching. You're still efficient, still lethal, but not perfect. And perfection is what this life demands. Worse than the pain is the awareness, the quiet, creeping certainty that you won't make it to old age, that there is no retirement, no safe ending. You've never met an old ninja. The ones who aren't killed in the field disappear into training halls or administrative posts, watching younger versions of themselves walk the same tightrope with the same hollow stare. And they all know the truth. Surviving isn't the reward. It's just the next stage of the punishment. There are nights when you sit in silence and try to count the number of people you've killed, but the number won't come. Not clearly. It's become a blur of faces, voices, moments of silence that were never filled again. You try to remember who you were before all this, but the memories are faint, replaced by disguises, roles, missions. At 25, you're in your prime, fastest, sharpest, most reliable. But you also know this is the most dangerous time to be alive, because when you're at your peak, they use you without restraint. They push you past your limits, and they don't expect you to come back. They just expect you to finish the job. They don't warn you about what happens after the mission. Not really. Everyone talks about the risk, the tactics, the split-second decisions, the act of killing, the act of escaping. But what they don't teach, what no one dares to mention, is the silence that comes after. The hours where the blade is sheathed, the disguise discarded, the blood wiped clean. You return to your quarters, sit on the floor, and realize there's nothing left to do. No enemy to watch, no wall to climb, just your own mind, spinning in a vacuum. The aftermath is never dramatic. There's no panic, no breakdown, just a kind of quiet unraveling. You replay every moment of the kill, not because you're haunted, but because your brain won't let go. The way the target reached for something, a weapon, a cup of tea, a prayer, the expression on their face before they fell, the sound their body made hitting the floor. It loops in your head like a ritual chant, not out of guilt, out of habit. Because you've been trained to be alert, to analyze everything, even after the danger is over. And now, without anything left to react to, your senses search for meaning in the empty space. You walk around the room just to feel the floor beneath your feet. You check your gear 3 times, even though you already cleaned it. You eat something bland, slowly, tasting nothing. You sit with your back to the wall. Always. That part never leaves. Sometimes it hits days later. You'll be walking through a village, disguised as a laborer or a traveling monk, and you'll smell something, a spice, a perfume, smoke from a cooking fire, and suddenly the face of someone you killed rises in your memory like a ghost summoned by scent. And you don't stop walking. You don't flinch. You just feel it settle inside you, a weight, a recognition, and then it's gone again. The loneliness is worse. Not the kind you feel when you're away from people, but the kind you feel near them, knowing you can't talk to anyone about what you've done, about what you're still doing. The world moves around you like it always does. Merchants shouting, children playing, bells chiming at the temple gates. And you're invisible in it, not because they can't see you, but because you don't belong to that world anymore. You're a thread pulled from the weave, functioning alone, meant to be unseen and eventually discarded. You think for a moment about writing it all down, about leaving a trace, but there's nowhere safe to hide words like that. And what would you even say? I killed a man who didn't know my name. I watched a family grieve from a rooftop before disappearing into the rain. There's no audience for that story, no listener who wouldn't flinch. So you keep it to yourself, like everything else. Because the real cost of being a ninja isn't in the moment the blade strikes. It's in the moment after, when the world pretends nothing happened, and you have to pretend right along with it. No one tells you how to handle grief when you're not allowed to feel it. They train it out of you early. The crying, the clinging, the questions. You watch other children vanish from training, and no one explains. No funerals, no goodbyes. Just an empty mat, a silence at breakfast, a name that's never spoken again. You're told they were weak, that they couldn't complete the path, that mourning them is dishonorable. So you learn to keep your feelings where no one can see them. And eventually you stop asking where people went. You already know. But grief doesn't leave just because you've buried it. It waits. It collects. The older you get, the more it piles up behind your ribs. The friends you almost had. The teachers who pushed too hard. The ones who didn't return. The ones you didn't let return. Sometimes it surfaces at the worst moments, halfway through a mission, disguised as a farmer, smiling at a stranger who reminds you of someone whose throat you opened 5 winters ago, a flicker of memory, of regret, and you crush it down before it gets you killed. You don't get to mourn them, not properly, not openly. You can't even speak their names, not to your commanders, not to your comrades, certainly not to yourself. To grieve is to admit connection, and connection makes you vulnerable. So instead, you pretend they never mattered. You pretend you never cared. And in doing so, you hollow out the last pieces of your own humanity. But sometimes, late at night, when the mission is done and the air is too still, you remember the little things. The way one of them used to hum while sharpening his blade. The way another always folded her robes the same way, 3 times, like it meant something. You remember their laugh or their cough, or the last words they said before the mission that ended them. And for a second, just 1 second, you let yourself feel it. That second is dangerous. It opens something, a crack, a fracture. And once it's open, the rest threatens to come flooding through. So you do what you've been trained to do. You breathe slowly. You find the silence. You close the door. Because grief, like all other emotions, must stay locked away if you want to survive another day. And yet, the more you survive, the heavier it gets. Not just the pain of those you've lost, but the pain of knowing no one will mourn you when your turn comes. You've erased so many people, so many memories. And when you finally fall, bleeding in a ditch, suffocating in smoke, collapsing on cold stone, no one will say your name. No one will write your story. You'll be just another silence, passed over like the ones you carry now. Grief, in your world, is not a moment. It's a permanent condition, not loud, just quiet enough to haunt you, forever. You learn to measure time in footsteps, not in days, not in seasons. Those things belong to people who live openly, who count birthdays and harvests and holidays. For you, it's the distance between rooftops, the rhythm of guard patrols, the seconds between one breath and the next when you're pressed flat beneath the floorboards. Time isn't marked by sunrises, but by escapes. It's calculated in how long it takes to poison a drink, to scale a wall, to disappear. And in this world where time is tactical, there is no such thing as a future. You're never told what comes next. You're not trained to dream of something better. You don't work toward retirement, or freedom, or peace. Those ideas are dangerous in your line of work. The moment you start thinking about a life beyond the mission is the moment you hesitate, and hesitation is a death sentence. So you learn to live only in the immediate, in the next step, the next breath, the next command. But somewhere deep down, that kind of existence starts to change you. Not suddenly, slowly, like a blade that dulls from use. You lose your ability to look forward to anything, even small things. Rice after a long day, a few hours of sleep, the sound of wind through the pines, stop feeling like comforts. They're just pauses, blank spaces between obligations. And eventually, the spaces shrink. The gaps close in. Every moment begins to feel like part of the job, even the ones that shouldn't. There are times when you wake up and forget what month it is, what province you're in, what your current name is supposed to be. It all blends together. You remember missions by who you killed or what burned, not by when. You stop counting how long you've been doing this because there's no endpoint to count toward. And without that, time isn't a path. It's a cage. You see it in the older ones, the few who made it into their 30s. The way they move, always alert but always tired. The way they speak, in brief clipped tones, like conserving breath for some final mission that never arrives. They've forgotten how to talk about anything but the job. They don't ask how your night was, or where you're from, or what you dream about, because they know you don't. None of you do anymore. And still, the machine turns. You wake, you train, you carry out the mission, you vanish again and again. Until one day, you don't. There is no final chapter written for you, no clock you punch to say, I'm done. The only real ending is when someone else takes your place, and your time, measured in kills, in silent rooftops, in vanished footprints, simply stops. No fanfare, no farewell, just silence. Exactly the way you were trained to leave it. They say the body remembers what the mind tries to forget. And if that's true, then yours remembers everything. Every fall from a rooftop. Every night spent crouched in freezing water, waiting for the right moment to strike. Every blow you didn't dodge. Every cut you stitched shut with your own trembling hands. You may still look young, but your body is aging faster than it should, cracking, aching, wearing out like a blade sharpened too many times. The injuries don't go away. They just get quieter, deeper, harder to ignore. The worst are the ones no one sees. The dislocated joints that never healed right. The fingers that no longer straighten completely. The ribs that ache when the weather changes. You stopped reporting injuries years ago because rest is a luxury no one gives you. If you complain, you're seen as weak. And if you're weak, you're replaced. So you tape it up, push through, pretend that your limp is just a short stride, that the sharp pain in your side is just a cramp. You perform strength even when your bones beg for mercy. You're constantly punished for surviving. Every mission takes something from you. A little more flexibility, A little more breath. One more nerve deadened. One more scar to cover when you put on a new disguise. They don't tell you that the price of being good at this job is that you won't be good at anything else. Not later, not ever. You move like a warrior, but inside your body is crumbling. And when you look around, you see it happening to others too. The older ninjas walk slower, speak less, flinch when they think no one is looking. Their bodies have become maps of pain, every movement a reminder that nothing was ever healed, only endured. Sometimes you catch yourself wondering what might have been if you had been born somewhere else, to a different family, a different class. Maybe you would have been a fisherman or a carpenter. Your hands would still ache, but from building, not breaking. Your back would still bend, but for craft, not crawling through filth in the dark. You imagine a life where pain meant you were alive, not just still functioning. But you were not given that life. You were handed this one. And now your body, the very thing you've used to survive, is also what traps you. You can't run as fast as you used to. You can't climb without wincing. The missions haven't stopped, but your edge has dulled. And in this world, a dull edge doesn't last long. And so you press on. Because you must. Because there's no rest for someone like you. Because the only thing more dangerous than being used is being useless. And when your body finally breaks for good, no one will lift you. No one will mourn you. You'll be left behind without a sound, exactly the way they trained you to go. You don't know how to pray. You see others do it. Farmers at roadside shrines, mothers lighting incense at temples, warriors kneeling before statues of gods with weathered faces and calm, forgiving eyes. But you never learned. No one taught you the words. No one showed you the rituals. The only gods you were ever introduced to were duty and silence, and neither of them listens when you call. It's not that you don't want to believe. Sometimes after a mission, when you're alone and the adrenaline hasn't worn off, you look up at the stars and feel something aching in your chest, something that might be a prayer if you had the right shape for it. Not a prayer for forgiveness, just for understanding, for some sign that what you're doing means something, that the blood you carry on your hands isn't just wasted, that you weren't born to vanish without ever being seen. But no sign comes, no voice, no warmth, just wind in the trees and the sound of your own breath, too loud in your ears. So you keep moving. You tell yourself that faith is a weakness, that it belongs to people who can afford to wait for answers. You were never allowed to wait. You were trained to act, to strike, to disappear. Belief doesn't keep you alive. Belief gets you killed. Still, there are moments, small, almost imperceptible, when doubt takes root. A child staring at you too long, as if she sees past your disguise. A dying man muttering to a deity before he falls still, while you crouch in the rafters with a blade already drawn. A festival lantern drifting into the night sky, carrying someone's wish while you watch from a rooftop, unseen, uninvited. These moments remind you there's a world beyond the mission. A world with rituals and stories and forgiveness. A world that never made space for someone like you. You begin to wonder what it would feel like to kneel and speak to a god. Any god. Not for salvation, but just to be heard. Just once. To say, I'm tired, I'm not sure who I am anymore. I don't know how much longer I can do this. But you say nothing. Because if the gods are real, you don't think they listen to people like you. Killers in the dark. Nameless, faceless shadows who leave silence where lives used to be. And if they do hear you, what would they say? That your suffering has purpose? That your sins can be washed away? You've buried too many to believe that. You've erased too much. The only thing waiting at the end of your path is the quiet, and maybe that's all you deserve. So you don't pray, you don't look for shrines, you don't light candles or whisper names. You simply keep walking into the dark, into the silence, hoping that if there is a God, he'll understand why you never learned how to ask for anything but survival. There's no legacy for someone like you. No scrolls written in your name, no monuments in stone, no stories passed down at family hearths. The whole point of your work is that it's never remembered, that your actions disappear as soon as they're complete. You strike from the dark and return to it just as quickly, leaving behind no signature but silence. And if the mission is done well, no one even knows it happened. That's what success looks like, erasure. And when success looks like erasure, what kind of legacy can you possibly hope for? You hear tales of warriors whose names are sung in temples, whose graves are visited with incense and folded cranes. Samurai who fell in battle are mourned with honor. Their armor is passed down, their weapons are preserved, but your blades are melted down and repurposed. Your name is stricken from records. Your death, if anyone learns of it, is either a rumor or a lie. Killed in action, fell from a cliff, died of illness. A quiet excuse to keep the machinery moving without pause. Sometimes you wonder if anyone will even know you were alive, not just in the tactical sense, not as a name on a list or a body in a disguise, but you, the person underneath the silence, the boy who once cried in training before he was punished for it, the teenager who flinched the first time a target looked him in the eyes, the man who sometimes dreams of other lives, ones he was never allowed to have. There are no children waiting to carry on your name, no students to pass your knowledge to unless the clan assigns you to training, which is usually what happens to those too broken to fight, too useful to discard. And even then, it's not a legacy, it's recycling. One weapon forging another. The blade makes the blade, nothing more. You think for a moment about carving your name into something, wood, stone, a hidden wall, in some forgotten part of the compound, just to prove you existed, just to leave something behind, but even that would be a betrayal, an unnecessary risk. So you don't. You let the thought pass. You let everything pass. And when someone asks about you, if they ever do, it won't be about your hopes, your pain, your doubts. It'll be about your record, the kills, the missions, the efficiency. They'll say you were loyal, sharp, reliable. And then they'll move on to the next name, the next shadow. That's the truth they never tell you during training. Being a ninja doesn't make you immortal. It makes you disposable. Your reward for surviving is silence. Your legacy is forgetting. And in the rare moment when someone remembers, they'll remember the work, not the person. The weapon, not the hand. The ghost, not the man who carried it all. They tell you the mask is just a tool, a way to hide your face, a symbol of discipline, something to wear on missions, to obscure your identity, to protect the ones you love, if you ever had anyone left to protect. But eventually, the mask stops feeling like a tool. It becomes something else, something permanent. You wear it long enough, and it doesn't just hide your face, it replaces it. At first, you only wear it during assignments. Black cloth, tied tight. Just enough to cover your mouth and nose, shadow your eyes. You stare through narrow slits at the world, and the world doesn't stare back. It's comforting, in a way. You feel powerful, invisible, safe. And when the mission ends, you take it off. Wash your face. Look in the mirror. Remind yourself that you're still there beneath it all. But over time, you start wearing it longer. Before the mission, after the kill, on long walks between villages. You tell yourself it's precaution, that it keeps you alert, that it helps you stay in character. But the truth is, you're starting to forget what your own face looks like. The expressions, the details. You only ever see your reflection when you're pretending to be someone else. Eventually, you stop checking altogether. It's not just the physical mask either. It's the layers you wear in your voice, in your body language, in your posture. You sit differently depending on the role. You speak in tones you don't recognize. You smile on command but never feel it. Every emotion becomes a calculation. Every reaction a performance. And soon, you don't know where the disguise ends and the real you begins. You meet people who only know you through a mask. Villagers, informants, lovers even. They fall for the voice you use, the face you present, the lies you tell. And part of you wants to tell them the truth. That you're not who you appear to be. That underneath all of this, there's a person trying not to disappear. But you never say it. You can't. Because if they saw the truth, they'd run. Or worse, they'd be ordered to. Eventually, the mask is the truth. You wear it even when you're alone, in the woods, in your quarters, at night, when no one is watching. It becomes more comfortable than your own skin, more honest than your own name. You start to believe that maybe this is who you really are now. Not a man, but a shadow in cloth, a voice without a face, a life without identity. And the worst part? No one notices the change. Because that's what you were trained for. To vanish, to blur, to fade. They don't want you to be remembered. They want you to be useful. And if the mask makes you more useful, then let it stay. Forever. You weren't taught to become a person. You were taught to become a function. And functions don't need faces. They just need results. You learn early that no one is coming to save you. Not if the mission fails. Not if you're caught. Not if you're wounded and crawling through enemy territory with broken ribs and blood in your mouth. There's no rescue party. No backup plan. You are the contingency, the one sent in because no one else could do it. And that means, if things go wrong, you solve it. Or you die. Alone. It's built into every lesson. Every drill. You're taught how to dress wounds with one hand, how to extract yourself from bindings using hidden blades, sharpened bone, even teeth. You're forced to run escape drills, blindfolded, barefoot, starving. Because if you can't survive on your own, you don't belong in the field. Every lesson is a warning. No one is coming for you. Not ever. You learn how to hide in the wilderness, how to build shelters from nothing, how to find edible roots in frozen soil. You learn how to drink rainwater off leaves and cauterize a wound with a heated blade while biting on your own belt. You practice holding your breath in muddy water for longer than feels possible. Every new skill is born from a question no child should have to ask. What if I'm left behind? And eventually that question isn't hypothetical. Maybe the signal never comes. Maybe the drop point is compromised. Maybe your handler sends you into a trap and cuts you loose to protect the clan. Maybe the soldier who was supposed to cover your exit panics and runs. There are a dozen ways it happens, all of them quiet, all of them irreversible. And when it does, you don't scream, you don't beg, you don't look back. You do what you were trained to do. You vanish. You crawl through woods for days with fever and infection. You kill a farmer's dog for food and cry while you eat it. You hide in an abandoned shrine, hallucinating your own death while praying to gods you don't believe in. And when you finally return, limping and half dead, no one celebrates. No one embraces you. They nod. They say you completed the mission. Then they hand you the other. You realize then that your value is only in your usefulness, that the bond between you and the clan is not trust, it's function. And the moment that function breaks, so do you. The only loyalty that matters is the kind that works under pressure, that doesn't flinch when abandoned, that doesn't ask for rescue even when it's deserved. So you stop expecting it. You stop waiting for the helping hand, the last-minute save, the cavalry. You stop dreaming about someone pulling you out of the mud and saying, "It's over. You're safe." Because that line doesn't exist in your world. In your world, there is no such thing as being saved. There is only surviving. There's a lie they tell you when you're young, that if you survive long enough, you'll eventually earn peace. That there's a point where the missions stop, the disguises end, and you can take off the mask for good. A quiet life in the mountains, a small home by a stream, maybe even a family. That if you give everything now, something will be waiting for you later. But the truth is, later never comes. By the time you've earned the so-called right to retire, there's almost nothing left of you to retire with. Your body is ruined from years of punishment. Your hands ache when the rain comes. Your knees creak on cold mornings. You sleep light, and never through the night. Your instincts, once razor sharp, now fire constantly, even when there's no danger. A door creaks, and your heart pounds. A child laughs too suddenly, and you reach for a blade that isn't there. You're always ready, even when no one's coming. And what's worse, there's no place for you anymore. You return to a village and realize you don't belong in it. You sit at a market and feel like an imposter. People laugh around you, but you can't remember how to join in. Your voice feels too careful. Your eyes always scan the exits. You try to rest, but rest only reminds you of how much you've given up. You weren't built for peace. You were built for endings. And without danger, you don't know how to exist. Some of the older ones are kept on as trainers. They limp around the compound, correcting form, handing out riddles like they're wisdom. But everyone knows they're just ghosts, too broken to be sent back into the field, too useful to be discarded. They die slowly, surrounded by students who don't know their names, only their skill. And when they finally collapse in their sleep, they're buried without ceremony. Another tool, worn down and tossed aside. You think about disappearing, just walking away into the wilderness, leaving behind the name, the silence, the guilt. But you know you'll never be allowed to vanish peacefully. You've seen what happens to those who try. Rogue, they're called. Liability. Someone is always sent to clean up, to make sure no secrets leave the walls. And if it's not you doing the killing, it's someone you trained. A student who now knows how to track your steps, how to find your breathing pattern in the dark. So you stay, not because you want to, but because there's nowhere else to go. You teach, you serve, you endure. And you try not to look at the young ones too long because you know what's waiting for them. The cycle doesn't break. It just starts again. New faces, new shadows, the same blade. There is no retirement, only waiting. And one day, the missions stop, not because you've been freed, but because you've finally been forgotten. The older you get, the more you become a rumor. A whisper passed from one recruit to the next. He survived 30 missions. She once escaped 10 men with only a smoke pellet and a rope. They don't say your name, they never knew it, but they speak of you like a ghost who walks among them. They glance at you in the courtyard, too afraid to approach. They imagine you as something more than human. But what they don't know is that all you ever wanted was to be less than what you've become. You watch the young ones train, just as you once did. Their movements are clean but tense. Their eyes are eager, hungry. You recognize the look. You once wore it too. It's the face of someone who doesn't yet understand what this path truly costs. They still believe in honor, in greatness, in the idea that surviving long enough will turn them into legends. You want to tell them the truth, that legends don't exist here, only survivors. And survivors are the ones who carry the most ghosts. But you don't speak, not because you've been ordered to stay silent, but because you don't know what to say anymore. What can you tell them? That every mission leaves a scar no one can see? That every escape feels less like a victory and more like a delay? That when they lie awake at night, unable to breathe because they're remembering the look in someone's eyes right before the kill, that's the real uniform they'll wear forever? You see one of the students flinch during a drill, just for a moment. The instructor beats him for it, calls it weakness, says it'll get him killed. You wince, not at the blow, but at the lesson, because it will get him killed. You know that. You've seen it. But what the instructor doesn't say, what none of them ever say, is that losing your fear doesn't make you brave. It just makes you empty. Sometimes one of the students will build up the courage to ask you something. Never anything personal, just a technique, a tactic, a rumor. Did you really escape from a prison with no weapons? You nod. You give a brief answer. You correct their stance. Then you walk away. Not because you don't want to connect, but because connection is the first thread that unravels everything. If you care about them, you'll see yourself in them. And if you see yourself, you'll remember what you used to be. And that hurts more than anything else. You weren't supposed to last this long. You were built for short brilliance and a quiet end. But now, here you are, still breathing, still walking, still haunted. You are living proof that survival is not the same as peace, that longevity in this life is just another form of punishment. They look up to you. They want to be you. And all you want is for them to turn around and run. You start to hear stories, not the ones whispered about you, but about those who tried to leave, the deserters, the vanished, the ones who walked away from the compound and never returned. At first, the stories come as warnings, cautionary tales meant to keep the younger ones obedient. He fled to the mountains. They found him a week later. She married a farmer. Her house burned in the night. Each story ends the same way: death in silence, punishment without question. The lesson is always clear: no one escapes. You don't know if the stories are true, but that doesn't matter. Their power isn't in their accuracy, it's in their repetition. They're designed to live in your head, to tighten the chain just enough that you stop fantasizing about freedom. You hear them during your drills, during meals, in the cold hours before dawn when your bones ache and your thoughts wander. They become part of the air you breathe, invisible, inevitable. But the idea still finds a way in. Because once you've survived long enough, you start asking questions no one wants you to ask. What if I left? What if I disappeared, not because I failed, but because I chose to? You picture a quiet life in a village too small for maps. You imagine growing food with your hands instead of taking lives with them. You imagine being able to sleep without dreaming of screams. And for a moment, just a flicker, it almost feels possible. Then the fear returns. Because you know how thorough they are. You know how far their reach goes. You've tracked people across provinces, killed targets in places they thought were safe. You know the patience of the clan, the way they wait for mistakes. You know they keep lists, faces, habits. You've been on the other side of this chase too many times not to understand how it ends. You could change your name, burn your uniform, shave your head, but your walk would still give you away. Your silence, your stillness, the way your eyes scan rooms, even when you're pretending not to care. You can't undo your training. You are your training. It's in your breath, in your bones, in every twitch of instinct. No matter where you go, they would find you. Or worse, they would send someone like you. And that person would do the job clean, because they've been told the same thing. Escape is betrayal. So you bury the idea again. You wake up the next day, stretch the same aching muscles, bow in the same direction, eat the same cold rice. You do what's expected, what's safe, and all the while, a piece of you stays buried beneath the stories, beneath the warnings, whispering a question you no longer dare to answer. What if you ran and no one caught you? But you'll never know, because fear keeps you where the blade can still be felt, even when it hasn't fallen yet. You tell yourself the job isn't personal, that you're just a tool, a shadow sent from one place to another to do what must be done. But sometimes, it does get personal. Not because of the target, but because of what the job takes from you. Sometimes, the assignment strikes too close to something you forgot you still cared about. A face that looks like someone you once knew. A village that smells like the one you barely remember living in before your training began. A laugh from a child that sounds like a memory you never meant to carry this long. You try to ignore it. You refocus. You repeat the rules in your mind. Get in. Finish the task. Get out. Don't look back. But something in the moment catches. A hesitation you didn't plan for. A flicker of recognition. And now the mission is no longer clean. You still complete it. You still vanish. But afterward, something's wrong. Something didn't stay buried the way it was supposed to. That's the danger of being in the field too long. Not the wounds, not the risk, the remembering. The mind isn't made for this kind of silence. Sooner or later, even the most conditioned brain tries to connect something. A place, a face, a time when you felt like you were a person instead of a weapon. And when that happens, the mission starts to unravel, not in execution, but in the aftermath. You don't fail. You just start to feel the cracks forming behind your eyes. It might be the way your hands shake the next morning, even though the mission was successful. It might be the way you start avoiding certain types of assignments, or the way your gaze lingers too long on someone before you strike. You try to bury it again, to reset. But it keeps happening, because the personal part doesn't go away. It just hides, waiting for the next opportunity to remind you that you were never just an empty vessel, no matter how hard you tried to become one. You stop trusting your own reactions. Every hesitation feels like a betrayal, every heartbeat like a countdown. You're not scared of dying. You've made peace with that long ago. What you fear is breaking protocol, of making it personal again and getting someone else killed because of it. Because the moment you start caring is the moment your precision slips. And that single crack is all it takes for the entire operation to collapse. Eventually, someone notices. A superior, a handler. They don't accuse you directly. They just ask a few too many questions. They start assigning you lighter tasks or watching your exits more closely. You can feel it, the invisible noose tightening. They think you've grown soft, that maybe the tool has developed a mind of its own. And in your world, that's not just a liability. It's a death sentence. So you do the only thing you can. You bury it deeper. The flickers, the memories, the moment it got personal. And you pray, quietly, uselessly, that next time you won't feel anything at all. There's a specific kind of exhaustion that comes from pretending to be something you're not, day after day, face after face, voice after voice. You wake up and wonder who you're supposed to be this time. A fisherman? A beggar? A monk with a limp and no past? You recite the names, the accents, the mannerisms, until they feel more natural than your own. And then at some point, they become your own. Because the real you, the original you, is too buried to resurface anymore. You don't just act, you inhabit. You learn how to move like someone with a different life, a different spine, a different reason to exist. You spend weeks embedded in a village, greeting people by name, eating with them, laughing at their jokes, knowing full well that you'll burn their homes to the ground when the signal comes. And when it does, you don't hesitate. Because that's the job. That's the mask. And masks aren't allowed to flinch. But what they never tell you is that the hardest part isn't wearing the mask. It's removing it. Because when the mission ends, you're left with fragments. Habits you picked up pretending to be someone else. A phrase you still use without thinking. The way you fold your clothes, or walk, or hum a song that wasn't yours to begin with. These things stick. They linger. You return to your quarters and find yourself reaching for a blanket the way your fake wife used to, or eating a dish that belonged to a fake past. It feels like grief, but for a life that never actually existed. You begin to question who you are underneath it all, if there's anything left at all, if the person you started as has just been overwritten layer by layer until there's nothing but old roles and burned villages where a personality used to be. You try to remember your original voice and find it distant, unfamiliar. You think about your own name and it feels like a line from a story you barely remember reading. This erosion isn't accidental. It's the design. Because the more identities you wear, the easier it is to stop asking questions. The more languages you speak, the easier it is to forget your first one. And once you forget where you started, you stop looking for where you're going. You just become the mission. A reflection. A mask made of memories that don't belong to you. And the clan sees this not as a tragedy, but as progress. The more you blur, the better you serve. You become the ideal operative. Someone who doesn't carry a self, only assignments. Someone who can slide into any role because they no longer have one of their own. You become perfect. But the price of perfection is identity. And once that's gone, there's no mask left to take off. You're not pretending anymore. You're just empty. There comes a moment in every ninja's life where the job no longer shocks you. The first time you kill, your hands tremble. The second time, you hesitate. But by the 20th, the 30th, the 100th, it's no longer a question of emotion. It's a function. Like drawing breath or blinking. You don't celebrate it. You don't regret it. You simply do it. And that's where the real horror lives. Not in the violence itself, but in how normal it becomes. You're given a name, and you end that name. It might be a man who's stolen secrets, or a woman accused of conspiring with enemies. You don't know. You're not told. It doesn't matter. You've stopped imagining their backstories, stopped guessing whether they deserved it. Morality has no place in a life that runs on obedience. You draw the blade, you finish the task, you leave. The world keeps turning. So do you. And yet, beneath that mechanical precision, something rots. You start to feel it in strange ways. The way your hands stay clenched for hours after a mission. The way silence feels heavier than it used to. The way you avoid your own reflection. Not because you hate what you see, but because you don't recognize it. You stare into your own eyes and see no flicker, no question, no weight, just vacancy, just the cold, practiced stare of a man who's forgotten how to hesitate. You tell yourself that it's necessary, that every target you remove makes someone else's life easier, that you're preserving balance, stability, order. But then you see who replaces the people you've erased. Another corrupt merchant, another violent warlord, another scheming official with a smile that never reaches his eyes. And it hits you. The machine doesn't want peace. It wants continuity. It wants bodies that fall quietly and replacements that fit into the same mold. You're not making things better. You're just keeping them from changing too quickly. And once you see that, the killing becomes heavier again, not because you feel guilt, but because you feel nothing and know you should. The worst part isn't the nightmares. It's their absence. You sleep through the night after a mission, dreamless, undisturbed. You wake up, stretch, eat, and prepare for the next one, like a craftsman with no pride in the craft. Just the rhythm, just the motions, just the silence between instructions. You think maybe if you had nightmares, it would mean there's still something human left in you, that a part of your soul is still resisting. But instead you get emptiness, and that emptiness is worse than any scream. Because a scream means something's alive. But you just keep moving, keep finishing tasks, keep stepping over bodies like they're stepping stones. You've become exactly what they wanted, someone who kills without flinching and lives without question. And the worst part is, you're very, very good at it. They never teach you how to stop. Not just the killing, not just the slipping through shadows, the poison, the climbing, the silence, but the momentum, the need to keep moving. Because when you've lived your life always looking over your shoulder, every still moment feels like a trap. Every breath you take while standing still feels like an invitation for something to go wrong. So you keep walking, keep training, keep preparing, even when there's no mission on the horizon. And when, on rare occasions, you're told to stand down, no assignments, no orders, you don't rest. You can't rest. Your body twitches at shadows. Your thoughts spiral. You scan rooftops without thinking. Memorize exits out of habit. You walk in circles around your compound like a wolf in a cage. Stillness isn't peace, it's threat. A reminder that if you're not moving forward, the enemy might already be behind you. The others are the same. You watch them sharpen already sharp blades, practice strikes with no opponent, rewrap gear they've never used. The downtime is supposed to be a reward, but to you, it's punishment. Because the moment you stop, all the memories catch up. Every kill, every betrayal, every time you had to disappear before anyone could ask your name. The silence amplifies it, makes it inescapable. You don't want to think. You want to function. You know how to function. And so the idea of a future, of stopping for good, feels like fantasy. A cruel one. People talk about peace like it's a village you can walk to if you survive long enough. But what they don't understand is that you're not built to arrive. You were built to move. The mask doesn't come off. The eyes don't relax. You don't settle into soft routines or plant vegetables in a garden. You don't become part of a community. You hover around its edges, always calculating. Even if someone tried to love you, you wouldn't know how to let them. You'd smile wrong. You'd touch them like they might vanish. You'd sleep with a weapon under the pillow. You'd disappear one morning before they woke up because some part of you still believes that caring is a vulnerability, and vulnerabilities get people killed. You think about stopping. Sometimes. In those in-between hours when the compound is quiet and your wounds are freshly wrapped. But the thought never lasts long. Because to stop would mean facing everything you've done without the buffer of duty. It would mean waking up to your own mind every day, unarmed. It would mean no more masks to hide behind. Just you. And that's the one person you've spent your entire life avoiding. So you don't stop. You can't. Not because someone is making you move, but because you no longer know how not to. And maybe that's the final trick they played. They didn't just teach you how to kill, they made sure you'd never learn how to stop. Pain becomes a language you speak fluently. Not just physical pain, the torn muscles, the broken ribs, the knife wounds stitched without anesthetic, but the deeper pain, the kind that's harder to locate, harder to name. It begins quietly, as most things do in this life. A stiffness in your joints, a lingering cough, a wound that won't quite heal the way it should. And before long, your entire body becomes a history of everything you've endured. You don't talk about it. No one does. There are no doctors here, not really. A sprain gets wrapped. A dislocation gets yanked back into place. Bleeding stops when it stops. You're expected to heal through willpower and quiet. If you limp, you hide it. If your hands shake, you train until they stop. Pain is weakness, and weakness means you're being watched. That maybe your next mission isn't meant to succeed, that maybe it's a test you're expected to fail. You adjust, you adapt, you learn how to move differently, how to breathe around the cracked rib, how to sleep sitting up because lying down makes the old injury scream. Your body becomes a patchwork, scar over scar, bruise over bruise. And with each new mark, you stop remembering how it happened. Not because the pain isn't real, but because there's been too much of it. You stop keeping track. But even worse than the physical pain is the weight of the ones that never healed, the kind that doesn't bleed, the kind that doesn't scab, the betrayal of someone you trusted, the silence after a mission where something felt wrong, the moment you hesitated and someone else died. These memories live in the back of your mind like old injuries that were never set properly. You can't touch them, but you feel them every day. There are nights when the pain is so deep, so total, you feel like a broken tool someone forgot to throw away. You lie awake, staring at the ceiling, too exhausted to sleep, too hollow to cry. And you wonder what the limit is, what finally makes the body or the mind stop. You've seen others reach it, quietly. A cut too deep, a poison not avoided, a mission that ends with a final fall and no return. Their deaths are efficient, expected. The system moves on. And when it's your turn, when your body finally says no more, you know there will be no rest, no gentle ending, no time to be mourned. You'll collapse during a mission or not return from a scouting trip. And that will be it. No record, no reverence. Just the next trainee, filling the space you left behind. They trained you to tolerate pain so that you'd keep functioning long after you should have stopped. And maybe, in the end, that's the cruelest part of all. You were never meant to heal. You were only meant to endure. You were taught to be invisible, but never what to do with yourself once you disappeared. From the beginning, the goal was clear: erase your presence, move without sound, kill without trace, vanish without name. And you did it. You became the shadow, the silence, the ghost that slips through walls and across rooftops. But what no one told you was that the better you got at vanishing, the more the world would stop recognizing you altogether. Not as an agent, not as a warrior, not even as a man. You walk through towns and people look through you. You sit in a room and no one asks your opinion. You pass through entire villages and leave behind no memory, no impression. At first, this was a source of pride. Success. Proof that you'd mastered the art. But after enough years, that pride sours. Because being unseen stops being a tactic and starts becoming who you are. You begin to forget how it feels to be noticed. You try sometimes to leave a trace. A scratched mark on a wall. A single coin left where none should be. A pattern of pebbles arranged just so. Nothing meaningful, just a reminder to yourself that you were there, that someone passed through this place, but no one ever sees it, or if they do, they don't understand it. It doesn't matter. The trace disappears like everything else you touch. Even your voice starts to fade. You go entire days without speaking, weeks sometimes. Your words rust in your mouth. When you do speak, it's to deliver false information in someone else's tone. You begin to wonder what your real voice sounds like. Not the one used in cover, not the tone used in briefings, just yours. You try to hum an old tune, but you don't remember any. You try to write something in your native script, but the letters come slowly, awkwardly, like carving into stone with your fingernails. Eventually, you become more concept than person, a role, a tool. Even among your own, there are no real conversations, only reports, only training. No one asks you where you're from. No one asks what you want. You suspect they wouldn't know what to do with the answers anyway. That's the price of perfect silence. No one interrupts it, not even to save you. You start to feel like a ghost before you're dead, wandering through life with no footprint, no voice, no warmth. People don't remember your face, and you stop expecting them to. You speak less. You move less. You exist less. Until eventually, you realize the most painful truth of all. You didn't just erase yourself from the enemy's eyes. You erased yourself from everyone's. And when that day comes, when you look in the mirror and don't see anything left behind the eyes, you finally understand why so many of your kind vanish without a trace. Because the real death didn't happen on a mission. It happened the moment no one could see you anymore, including yourself. There's a moment that comes after too many missions, too many names erased, too many faces blurred into the fog of memory. You begin to feel something you were never trained for. Not fear, not pain, not doubt, but emptiness. A hollowness that follows you even after you've done everything right. You complete the mission. You return without a scratch. You're praised in silence with a nod. And yet something inside you doesn't return. It stayed out there, on that roof, in that alley, at the foot of that body, like part of your soul decided it had seen enough and refused to come back. You don't notice it at first. You still move like you're supposed to, still eat, still sleep, still go through the rituals of daily survival. But slowly, everything starts to flatten. Food tastes like dust. Conversation becomes noise. Your own breath becomes background static. You stop reacting when someone dies. You stop blinking when you hear your next assignment. You stop caring. And that's the most dangerous shift of all. Not when you're afraid, but when you aren't anything. You go through the motions because you don't know what else to do. You wake before dawn, train, maintain your weapons, receive your orders, leave, return, repeat. There's no resistance, but there's no enthusiasm either. Just automation. Like you've become the sword itself, sharpened, stored, drawn, sheathed. You don't even flinch anymore when you kill. You're not proud. You're not ashamed. You're just absent. Fully functional, but no longer present. Others notice in their own quiet way. They stop assigning you the complicated roles. They keep your missions short, direct, clean, because they know what's happening to you. They've seen it before. That look in the eye, the 1,000-yard stare that doesn't end. They won't say it to your face, but the truth is obvious. They're preparing for your replacement. And if you're not careful, they'll do it themselves. Sometimes you wonder if there's a way back, if the emptiness can be filled, if some part of you, however small, can be salvaged, but you wouldn't know where to start. You've been trained to remove pieces of yourself, not recover them. Every part of your identity that might have helped you feel joy, love, meaning, those were liabilities. And they were cut away early, cleanly, efficiently. You begin to realize the work didn't just shape you, it unmade you. What's left is a shell that still moves, still obeys, still survives, but no longer knows why. And maybe that's what they always intended. To create something so stripped of identity that it cannot rebel, cannot dream, cannot grieve. A tool that thinks only of function, never of freedom. But even a hollow shell can feel the wind pass through it. And somewhere, deep inside the emptiness, there's a question that keeps whispering louder with each mission. If I'm not me anymore, why am I still alive? The first time you're sent to eliminate someone you've spoken to before, everything inside you freezes for half a second. It's someone from a village you passed through on another mission. They gave you water or shared a fire. Nothing special, nothing that should matter. But now their name is written in ink on a scroll, and you're the one who has to cross it out. You try to tell yourself that it's coincidence, that they must have done something to deserve it. But that voice in your head, the one that still remembers how to think, how to feel, it doesn't believe you. You still do it, of course. You have to. You complete the task with the same precision you've always had. Blade in, blade out. No sound, no trace, no hesitation. But the hesitation isn't in the body, it's in the aftermath. You return to your quarters that night and can't stop replaying their face. Not the way it looked when you killed them, but how it looked when they smiled, when they handed you a bowl of soup and said, "Be safe, traveler." They didn't know who you were, and you're starting to wonder if you do either. This isn't guilt, not exactly. You've done far worse. You've killed more than you can count. You've watched buildings burn with people inside. You've poisoned wells. You've sent messages that triggered wars. But this time it's different, not because of what you did, but because of what you remembered. The memory slipped past your defenses. It wasn't part of the mission. It was personal. And personal, in your world, is dangerous. You try to bury it like everything else. You go back to training. You say nothing. You show no sign. But something inside you has shifted, and you feel it in subtle ways. You flinch when someone says that village's name. You avoid certain faces during assignments, not out of fear, but out of memory. The mask you wear suddenly feels thinner, like a layer of paper stretched over a wound that's finally started to bleed again. And then the orders keep coming. Each new mission brings with it a question you're afraid to ask. What if I knew this person too? You try to stop remembering names, stop learning faces. You keep your conversations shorter. You stop making eye contact. You kill faster, so there's less time to notice who they are. But the memories still slip through. A voice, a gesture, a name whispered in a crowd that lodges in your mind like a blade that won't come loose. You begin to understand that the more you survive, the more likely it becomes that the people you've known, even briefly, will become your targets. Because in a world this small, everyone is expendable, including you. And maybe that's the real mission. Not the elimination of enemies, but the elimination of every connection, every fragment of feeling, every name that meant something. Until the only name left is yours. And even that one's fading. Somewhere along the line, you stop fearing death. Not because you've made peace with it, but because it's the only thing left that makes any kind of sense. Death is clean, final, simple. A blade drawn across the neck, a drop of poison, a fall that ends in silence. You've seen enough of it to know what it looks like, what it smells like, what it feels like when it's standing right behind you, watching, waiting. And strangely, it becomes comforting. Because unlike your life, death doesn't lie to you. Every day you live is a negotiation with your orders, with your instincts, with the gnawing sense that you're becoming less human every time you succeed. You're not growing, you're being hollowed out. But death is honest. It doesn't pretend to be duty. It doesn't wear a mask. It simply arrives when it's ready, and then everything ends. You think about it more than you should. Not dramatically, not in despair, just logically. You've outlived your projected usefulness. You've survived more missions than most, and now you're older, slower. Your vision isn't what it used to be. Your hands ache in the morning. There are students faster than you, stronger, hungrier. You can see it in their eyes, the same look you once had before you understood what it meant to last. You wonder how it will happen, if it will be in the field, like it's supposed to be, a final mission, a knife in the ribs, a moment of silence as your blood sinks into foreign soil. Or maybe it'll be quieter, more deliberate. A reassignment that's really an execution. A student sent to escort you who never lets you return. Or maybe you'll simply collapse in your quarters and no one will notice for hours because you're not important anymore. Just another shadow past its usefulness. But still, you keep going. Not because you want to live, but because living is what you've been trained to do, whether you want it or not. Survival has become reflex, and you follow that reflex every single day, even as the part of you that wants to survive fades. What no one tells you is that the longer you live, the more you become a warning to others. The recruits see you and think twice before idolizing your longevity. The instructors point to you not as a model, but as a reminder of what it looks like when you survive too well for too long. You become the future everyone quietly dreads. And one night, sitting alone in the corner of the compound with no assignment in hand, you finally admit it to yourself. You don't fear death. You envy it. Because death is the only freedom you were never trained to resist. And in a life where everything has been taken, stolen, erased, it's the only thing they can't command. You begin to notice how many things you've forgotten. Not just names or faces, those vanish quickly in your line of work, but the parts of life that other people take for granted. The sound of a real laugh, not one forced during a disguise. The feeling of eating because you're hungry, not because the mission allows it. The warmth of a fire made for comfort, not concealment. These aren't just small pleasures. They're reminders of a world that still has meaning, even if you've been trained to live outside of it. You walk through a village and smell food you used to love, except you can't remember what it was called, can't remember if you ever actually tasted it, or if it's just a detail from someone else's life, a disguise you wore too well. You hear children playing and realize you don't remember the last time you played anything. Every movement you make is deliberate, efficient, practiced. There's no room for joy in precision, no room for wonder in discipline. And then, one day, you pass a mirror or a reflective surface, a still pond, a blade, and you stop. Because for the first time in years, you're looking not through yourself, but at yourself. The lines around your eyes, the small scar beneath your jaw, the tired weight behind your gaze. You don't look like a warrior, or a hero, or a ghost. You look like someone who has been used, worn down to the last thread and held together by routine alone. You wonder briefly who you might have been, if things had gone differently, if you'd been born in another family, another village, another class. You imagine yourself as a fisherman, a scribe, a man with stories that don't end in silence. But the image fades as quickly as it came, because the truth is, even if you could have been someone else, this is who you are now, not by choice, but by force, by necessity, by survival. And what does survival even mean anymore? It meant something once, when you were younger, when each mission felt like a test of skill or fate. But now, survival is just another word for waiting. Waiting for the next name, the next scar, the next step toward becoming even less than you already are. You've trained yourself to endure, to move without thought, to kill without hesitation. But you were never trained for moments like this, where no one is watching, where there's no mission, no enemy, no role, just you, a mirror, and the faint realization that you don't remember the sound of your own voice when it's not lying. You keep walking, because that's what you do. But in the quiet between footsteps, in the space between orders, you carry the question that no one in your world is allowed to ask. If I am nothing but what they made me, then what happens if I stop playing my part? And worse, what's left of me if the part is all that ever existed? You've seen 1,000 deaths, but no funerals. In your world, the dead don't get ceremony. They get forgotten. A name scratched from a ledger, a mat reassigned, a blade passed to another hand. When someone dies in the field, there's no procession, no prayers, just silence. If the body is recovered at all, it's burned without a marker. If it isn't, the assumption is that the job consumed them, literally or figuratively. Either way, they're erased. You used to wonder who would mourn you, if anyone would feel your absence. But now, you don't even expect that much. The truth is, they've already prepared for your death. They did it the moment they trained your replacement, the moment they stopped calling you for the more delicate assignments, the moment your file was thinned and passed to another set of eyes with newer interests. You haven't died yet, but the system has already let go of you. And so you start to let go too, not in a dramatic way, not by refusing orders or throwing your blade into the sea, but in quieter ways. You wake up slower. You polish your gear less. You start letting memories slip, even when you try to hold on to them. You catch yourself staring at trees or rivers or strangers as if you're trying to memorize something, some proof that you are still here, even as the rest of you begins to vanish. The other ninjas avoid talking to you now. You've become a reflection of what they don't want to see in themselves. A glimpse of what time and silence eventually do to someone who survives too long. The students call you the old one, even though you're barely past 30. But in this life, 30 might as well be 60. You carry more ghosts than muscle now. Sometimes, in the quiet of the night, you find yourself performing a kind of funeral for the ones no one else will honor. You whisper their names if you remember them. You recall their posture, their strange habits, the way they laughed or held a blade. It's not enough, but it's something. A last act of defiance against the erasure that defines your world. You wonder if anyone will do the same for you. Probably not. Your death will be clean, quiet, functional. Maybe in the field. Maybe in your sleep. Maybe ordered from above because you've outlived your usefulness. There will be no tears, no candles, no words, just absence. Another shadow that stopped moving. Another ghost that no longer lingers. And when that moment comes, you won't fight it. Not because you're ready, but because you've already grieved the life they never let you have. The one with names and choices and peace. You've buried enough strangers to know what it looks like when someone dies without being remembered. And long before your final breath, you understood. You were already one of them. The day you finally stop fighting isn't the day you die. It's the day you realize you've already given everything you had to give, and it still wasn't enough. Not for freedom, not for peace, not even for recognition. You spent your life serving a system that devours its own, believing that loyalty would earn you a place, a name, a moment of rest. But now, standing at the edge of whatever years you have left, you understand the truth. All it ever earned you was silence. You look around at what remains. The compound is quieter than it used to be. New faces pass you in the corridors, sharp-eyed and hungry, but they don't nod in respect. They barely see you. They're too busy chasing the same ghost you once chased. Purpose, mastery, approval. You want to tell them the truth, to warn them, but you don't. Not because you're afraid, but because you know they wouldn't listen. You wouldn't have listened either. You still move like a weapon, but there's no edge left. Just form without force. Your limbs remember how to strike, how to vanish, how to kill, but your heart isn't in it anymore. And that's what truly marks the end. Not your age, not your injuries, but the hollow space where intention used to be. You wonder sometimes if it would have been better to fall young. On a mission, in glory, at your sharpest, to be remembered, if only briefly, as someone who burned out instead of faded. But you didn't. You endured. You outlived your usefulness. You survived so long that your name turned to dust, your skills to echoes. You are no longer feared, no longer watched. You've become a fixture, a creaking floorboard, a worn training mat, familiar but unremarkable. There's no ceremony for stepping back, no retirement, just fewer assignments, less eye contact, eventually no orders at all. You're given a small room, a cup of rice. The implication that your time is done, but no one says it aloud, because in your world, even endings must be quiet. So you start to write, not for others, but for yourself. Scraps of memory, names of people you once knew, details of missions you can't forget, no matter how much you wish you could. It's not a confession. It's not even a record. It's proof that you lived, that you were someone, even if the world never knew who. And as you write, you feel something strange, something that hasn't stirred in years. Relief, not peace, not redemption, but a sliver of something close, a breath not weighed down by duty, a moment untouched by the mask, a flicker of you, surviving somewhere beneath the layers they tried to carve away. You know this won't last, that soon your body will give out, or someone will find the writings and burn them, or a final order will arrive and you'll answer it like you always have. But for now, in this fading light, you exist. And for the first time in years, that's enough. And so it ends. Not with a final mission or glorious fall, but with a quiet morning that feels no different from any other. You wake, you breathe, you stretch the same worn limbs. The world outside your door continues. Birds calling, footsteps in the training yard, someone sharpening a blade you no longer carry. No one knocks. No orders arrive. No one looks your way. You've become what every ninja eventually becomes, a shadow that outlasted its purpose. You don't feel sad. Not exactly. You passed that threshold long ago. Grief, anger, hope, they were all sanded down by years of silence and survival. What you feel now is something quieter, something more final, a stillness that settles deep inside your chest and says, this is it. Not a dramatic ending, Not vengeance, not freedom, just the closing of a long, narrow corridor you've walked your whole life. You step outside. The sun is low. The sky is pale. A few students cross your path, sparring with wooden swords, laughing too loudly. They don't see you. They never do. You could tell them everything, warn them of what's coming, what this life becomes. But you don't. You let them believe in honor, in legacy, in the path they think they've chosen. That belief will erode soon enough, like it did for you. No need to hasten it. Instead, you walk, past the compound, past the worn stones, into the woods that always called to you, not for escape, but for silence. And there, beneath the trees, where the leaves murmur and the wind doesn't demand anything of you, you sit. You don't meditate. You don't prepare. You just exist. For once, not as a tool, not as a weapon, not as a ghost. You think of the ones you lost. Not just the targets, but the comrades, the fragments of yourself scattered across missions. The version of you that smiled without calculation. The child who once believed that serving meant belonging. You close your eyes, and for the first time in what feels like forever, you don't see blood or rooftops or orders. You see a face, your own. Not the face others saw, masked, hardened, blank. But the one you never got to grow into. The person you might have been if the world had allowed you anything more than shadows and steel. And then, with no audience and no ceremony, you let go. Not because you failed, but because you endured everything that was asked of you and somehow still remembered you were human. They'll forget you. That's how it works. The records will skip your name. The walls will never carry your story. But maybe, somewhere, a tree will remember the way you leaned against it that final day. Or the wind will carry a whisper that sounds like your voice. And in that quiet you'll live, not as a legend, not as a killer, not as a tool, but as a man, finally at rest.